experience or background is, in my opinion, is exactly what we need here at this organization right now. So I am really thrilled. And so, Noelle, do you mind just doing a little introduction about yourself? And
Sure. I always feel so pumped up to come and meet council. I'm normally high-fiving because I feel like as a city employee, it is the top of the game to be able to come in, meet, and discuss with council any topic that's on your agenda or on my agenda to talk about. I love the partnership and collaboration, so I'm going to try and just take a breath. And here we are, it's a new council, but my name's Noelle. I came from Aurora for the last 12 years. That's been my experience. I actually started out running the 911 center out at Aurora, doing all the HR training, all the hiring, investigation, so a lot of the HR work. But it was really, really helpful to me to learn police and fire and public safety and how their shifts work, how operations work, which has a nice translation also into our labor groups. So in like public works and all of those things, it was really helpful. Taught me to be quick on my feet, to come up with solutions quickly and to make adjustments as needed. And then about halfway into my tenure at Aurora, I moved over to the HR department and I started as an employment and compensation analyst, administrator, so I was over that team, and we did a 2.5-year class and comp study that was completed just a little bit ago. Then I moved up to the HR manager where I have the responsibility over benefits, employee relations, training, employment and compensation, and then I ended my tenure as the interim director out there for Aurora. So then I included all the risk also in my area of expertise. So I'm just so happy and so thrilled to be out here. This is a really great community. I have family who lives out this way, so it's really nice to always be in a work for an organization where you're also supporting your family and your community members, which I really appreciate. So my style, probably as a director, is maybe if you talk with them, is collaborative. I like to try and think a little bit more progressively about how we can tackle problems while working inside the policy and the structure, right? That's so important as we have charter and things that just can't be changed, right? It just can't be changed. So we have to figure out how to be solutions driven with what we have, and that's always a challenge in working for government, but I appreciate it and I really enjoy it. I don't know, do you have any questions? I feel like I just spoke really fast.
You live in Littleton?
I don't, I live in Aurora, but I have family who lives out here, so that's always nice.
Yep. Great.
Great, well welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to have you on board.
Yes, and one last little plug just to throw in there. We're doing a Take Your Child to Work Day. We're participating in that this year. It's on Thursday, and we have a session with the city clerk's office on how to be a council member and how to do that. So we're going to be at the council chambers. It's at 10 o'clock if anyone is wanting to come by.
Thursday?
We do. We have about 35 kids who have RSVP'd to come and spend the day here to learn about police, fire. They're getting a tour. We're going to teach them how to be a council member. We're going to cook a little hot dog lunch for them. So if anyone wants to come and really show them the ropes on how to be a council member, we would appreciate
I'm
anyone
sure we have
who wants
something to learn ourselves from them.
Yeah, so we're excited. We kind of did it short notice. I noticed we weren't participating, and so then we did it, and we had a really huge response. So it's really fun. We're excited for it.
I threatened to bring my 4-year-old granddaughter and turn her loose, but then I pulled back. So that's probably not best.
Well, it was funny, the response from the employees is, we had a great response on Bring Your Child, and then everyone's like, well, my child has 4 paws. My child meows. Do those count? So that was kind of funny, too.
That's a little bit about our community. And
right.
Culture.
Absolutely.
What brought you to Littleton, or what made you choose Littleton as a place to live?
So Aurora is very, very busy, and so there's a few things that I really enjoyed about Littleton. The first was when I applied, the process was very, very smooth, and the staff was very welcoming. Even though the interviews were tough, it just felt like they listened, and then I got to listen. It was more of an exchange than a really rigid process, which I appreciated. I felt like everyone was candid and honest about what they would expect from me, and I really liked that. And then I also felt like Aurora gave me a lot of experience that I think will be helpful here, but there's a few things that I've never done before, and so I was really interested in that and being able to learn some of those pieces. So it's a challenge both ways to be able to do that. But the community is great. I've watched some of the recorded videos on council, being able to understand that and the community and what's important to them, and I just found that my values, I felt like aligned with this workforce and this community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noelle.
Okay,
so our first agenda item is a joint meeting with Historic Preservation Board. And we have chair and the chair here this evening. So Mike and Pam, come on up and join us at the front of the table. And we're going to wing it because I don't have the agenda. So, first thing we wanted to talk about is, and I'll have Mark share this. This was originally scheduled as a breakfast with Historic Preservation, and we had to change that around. So appreciate you guys being accommodating for that. It's always beneficial for council to meet with our quasi-judicials in particular to get a feel for what we're working on, kind of what we're doing, hear where you guys are, what you're doing. Oftentimes there are concerns or issues or requests, so this is a good time to bring those to us. And obviously in the study session, you're not going to get a decision today in terms of what, if it's something that needs to move forward, it would go staff recommendation to a meeting. But the first thing we wanted to talk about and to kind of remember from the agenda is we wanted to give a bit of an update to you guys about what we're working on and how it will intersect with the Historic Preservation Boards in terms of our comp plan and some of our code work. So I'll let Mark kind of give an overall what we're doing.
Well, and I'm not sure if Jocelyn Mills, our community development directors, have much of an opportunity to kind of share with you our vision to comp plan process. Okay, well, good. Then I won't be repeating something here. The City Council had a retreat back here in early February, and they identified what they called a series of strategic imperatives, one of which had to do with kind of financial sustainability, another had to do with relationships, and the third had to do with what we call this vision to comp plan. And it's a task here that our councils, not just this one, but previous ones, have kind of struggled to some extent to try to get to an end. We've had various efforts here, and kind of from a planning perspective, to understand really what is the direction of the city here long term. So the council said, this is it, this is the opportunity, so we want to have a process going forward to engage our community here through a pretty extensive citizen engagement process to define that vision, to actually establish what we believe are the values here throughout the community. And I think we all recognize that those values can change a little bit depending on what part of the community you're in, but overall we're confident we're going to see a theme throughout the community. And no doubt, quite honestly, historic preservation in the downtown is likely to come up as one of the themes that we're going to hear about. So that visioning process is, in essence, setting a series of values that we're going to find here in the community, and we'll set a direction here for the formal comprehensive plan. So that's the policy document. That's the one that actually sets the direction. And we use kind of an example here in the comp plan of one of the outcomes of that will be vision and the future land use map. So if that's where we want to go in the next several decades, then what does that future land use map look like? What's that possibility? Then we test it with a series of elements, and those elements can be transportation master plan, they can be an economic analysis, all of that in essence to test whether or not that vision, future land use map is sustainable. And I think that what we're going to find here is that the downtown historic preservation is likely to be a theme in some of this discussion. So how that fits ultimately into the comprehensive plan is yet to be determined. And so I believe your board, planning commission, the whole community is probably going to have a discussion about your role and how it fits into all this. Ultimately, at the very end, and we're talking about trying to get before the council the official adoption of the comp plan at the end of next year, that will eventually then lead to the final step, which is the update to our codes, our regulations. And that's obviously the implementation of the vision and all of that policy direction. So that's the detail. So I think what you're going to find, again, is that through this entire process, probably for the next 3+ years, all the way through the codes, is that Planning Commission, Historic Preservation Board, those are two boards in particular that will likely be very involved in this process.
No, that'd be great. We'd love to be involved. Instead of not knowing what's going on, not being able to at least give our inputs. That'd be great. And by the end of next year, you mean the end of this?
Next, yeah, 2019, yes. Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more detail. You know, the visioning process.
They should introduce themselves.
Oh, yeah, we probably should.
All right, well, let's back up. The listening audience, please introduce yourself.
My name is Pam Grove, and I'm the chair of the Historical Preservation Board.
My name is Mike Price, and I'm vice chair of the Historical Preservation Board.
Yeah, so just I think a little bit more comment to the visioning piece of this. We are seeing probably taking us through the end of this year, and then we'll probably start here at the end of this year, a little bit of overlap in the actual comprehensive plan. So Jocelyn Mills and a team of other department directors are actually trying to manage that process here. So I think we're in the early stages of trying to lay out a schedule. So I'm confident here in the very short term that we'll be able to share that with you, but also with the entire public here.
And just not to be too specific, but where do you see us fitting in? What kind of discussions will we have around historic preservation, this theme idea?
Well, I think that's yet to be determined here. I think we have a few ideas. We've hired a firm called Kendig Keist, and this is their specialty, actually citizen engagement, and probably one of the highlights of this firm's expertise. And so we have right now we're trying in the process of laying out that engagement process, and so that's not only the public, but quite honestly other groups, boards, commissions, and so if you be a little more patient with us, we can be very specific with you here pretty quick.
Okay, so you don't have anything yet. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Last night, we had a very good study session with Planning Commission regarding the new downtown design standards, which are going to be proposed and then worked on. Will that be part then of the comp plan, Mark? It's kind of an early phase of integration.
Took a bite of my cookie, I knew better. Yes, in fact, the council, we had a long conversation at the retreat here about all the past work that we've done and the work that we continue to do. It's not like we can stop everything or ignore the past. And so I think there's a conscious effort for the consultant to gather all the past information, but certainly making sure we understand where we're going with some of these other planning issues like the design guidelines to make sure that we fit them into this process. So as we define this vision, then ultimately update the comp plan, that all that rolls together.
So everything will flow like streams into a river as opposed to U-turns?
We sure hope so, as opposed to a flood. Yes.
Or a drought.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam, do you have a copy of the agenda by chance?
I saw it online, I don't have it in front of
I
me.
know, I don't have one either. Well, let's just wing it.
Okay.
So let's hand it off to you guys.
Okay.
We had an agenda for our,
Well, and it basically had, from our perspective, 2 items and then any discussion that you want to
Okay.
have. And I'll tell you what those 2 items are. So thank you for explaining to us about the comp plan and what we can expect, because we definitely want to be involved. So we want to focus on 2 key things tonight that we have been working on with the community and with some civic leaders and with our board. And the first one is looking at downtown Littleton and very strategically looking at what it's going to be like in the foreseeable future. And we want to recommend that we look at, and I don't know how this fits into the comp plan, but that we look out phasing in an opt-in district and phasing in an all-inclusive historic district. And all we're looking at this point, we're recommending that we look at Main Street, just from the courthouse to Carnegie Library or the Melting Pot. Not go beyond that, because that's kind of really the signature of our unique downtown. And then we have another small project we want to look at, and that is a sign that we want to put up somewhere in downtown Littleton, highlighting our history, and so that visitors can kind of get oriented very quickly. And that's something that we can get a grant for, but we need to go get co-funding for it. So those are the 2 things we want to talk about. And just to orient you, as I know you've got many issues on your plate, you deal with many boards, just a reminder of what our mission is and what we go by. The purpose of the Historical Preservation Board is to work to preserve the built environment that gives a unique sense of place and community to our community. Further, the Historical Preservation Board encourages reinvestment and compatible growth, which enhances Littleton's economic vitality. So in that vein, we work on certificates of appropriateness when property owners that are in the Main Street Historic District or landmark throughout Littleton want to make changes to their property and to renovate their property. And we've worked on various preservation projects that we have that our various members spearhead. And traditionally, when we've met with you in the past, we've talked about them and we showcase them. And I'd be more than happy to share with you a work plan and a list of all the preservation projects we're working on. But we really want to focus on these two things tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to give you a little bit of history about Historical Preservation Board, how it came to be, and what has happened with the district over the last few years, bringing us to kind of the current. And then I'd like to have a discussion, answer any questions, and see where we go from here. We have some ideas. I'm sure you have some ideas. I can throw them out, but we can hopefully come to agreement whatever the next step is. Is it more research? Is it what do we need to do? And we're very familiar with this project. We have talked to communities. We have talked to citizens. Not everybody. We've also, over the years, have talked to property owners in the district, property owners that aren't in the district. So we do have some knowledge of this. So I'm going to turn over to Mike and let him review kind of where we've been.
Okay, thank you, Pam. The Historic Preservation Board was founded in the late 1990s and really came to be a force in the city, I would think, in the early 2000s. There was a great deal of controversy about a Main Street Historic District, and there was a Sturm und Drang about whether people were going to be forced into it. There were many reasons that were given for not participating in it. Ultimately, a compromise was achieved and it became an opt-in district. It is the only opt-in certified local government district in Colorado. There are 123 historic communities, 60 of which are CLGs, and a certified local government is basically a partnership among the National Park Service, the State Historical Board, and the local government. And there are benefits for being part of a CLG because you get funds from the feds which are passed through the state to the local community for things like our property surveys, like our Littleton Boulevard Corridor Survey, for example, and for education and for rehabilitation of historic structures and so forth. So Colorado has said now, the State Historical Board, they will not certify any local governments that are not, if you will, all-inclusive. Opt-ins will not be considered anymore. And once it's gone, it's gone. That's kind of the theme of our approach these days. If we lose those buildings that are historically significant, not only do we lose our sense of place, but those building owners who have taken the steps to be included in the district, may be damaged by those who are able to demolish their historic buildings and replace them with something that is a little less historic. We have, over the past 12 years, we've been an opt-in district, and there are 57 properties in the district. Of those 57, 36 have opted in. Many have opted in because we have a $50,000 a year grant program, which people who have or owners who have opted in are eligible to apply for. Over the past 4 years, one building per year has opted in and has been a recipient of those grant funds. Of the remaining 21 properties, in my opinion, 14 are contributing, which mean they're significant buildings. They're buildings that are really worth preserving. And 7 are buildings that have been remodeled to the point where they're really not contributing in a historic sense anymore. Those that are contributing that are not opted in are generally clustered at the southeast corner of Curtis and Main. So if you go from Jake's beer and coffee bar, Jake's Bar to the end of the street to Curtis on that side of the street, there are 7 buildings right there that those are all very key buildings in our opinion. We have 4 distinct architectural styles among the buildings on Main Street. We have Italianate, we have 20th century, early 20th century commercial, We have Italian Renaissance, and we have Mission Revival. These predominating styles are typical of the late 1800s and early 1900s. And I was reading the downtown area plan, which is part of our historic preservation code, and it says in there, those elements of the downtown area's built environment that are essential to Littleton's unique sense of place and identity will be preserved, while reinvestment and compatible redevelopment that will enhance Littleton's economic vitality are encouraged, much like Pam said as part of our mission statement. And then from the downtown design standards that have been in place, although they were, how many pages, Jocelyn? 500 pages, are being culled down to 70 or so now. The Main Street Historic District draws its integrity from these important design elements: 1 to 2 story buildings, storefronts, smaller lots, smaller scale material. And redevelopment on Main Street should simply fill in gaps in the street frontage and align with the faces of existing buildings. And the character of the new architecture should complement the existing early 20th century buildings without trying to recreate that era. So many of the perceived restrictions and objections for joining the district have just not come true. These were a rise in insurance rates, that shop owners would not have control over their operating hours, they would not be able to paint their buildings the color they desired. They thought property values would go down. They did not think there would be enough incentives to join, and they didn't want another layer of government. Now, relative to the incentives, each year in the past 4, I said that we've got a new building that has come in. And relative to another layer of government, in reviewing the downtown design guidelines and standards as they apply to sub-area 5, which is Main Street, they're almost equivalent to the historic preservation guidelines. The historic preservation guidelines require a little higher level of diligence when you're rehabbing your building, but boy, they're pretty similar. And I guess the last thing I want to say was we've got 2 zoning areas in downtown Littleton. We've got a CA zoning area, which is most of the street, and then from Merle's to the Melting Pot is a B2 zoning area. And it would be good if in our comp plan, Mark, we could somehow figure out a way to make sure that the design standards and guidelines apply to all the buildings along Main Street. So that's all I got.
So that's kind of a lot of information.
So I have a question. I thought we have several historic places that you didn't mention, historic designated places, including on Loughton, Loughton Street. Is there not a street also west of the river? The Bowles, the
Arapahoe Hills.
Arapahoe Hills is a federal or a national district. It's not a local district. And Loughton Street is a local district. Yeah, that's all residential, Peggy.
I thought one of the properties around Platte Canyon and 2 houses from the corner, maybe.
We have a series of landmarked buildings throughout.
So, okay. Yeah, so I mean, for people listening, I think that's important for them to know because maybe they'd like to do that with their place.
That's a good point, Peggy. We do have a landmarking program where people who would like to landmark their buildings on a local level can make an application through staff. Staff reviews it and then sends it on to the Historical Preservation Board, who then either recommends it or does not recommend it. And if we recommend it, then it goes on to council for full approval. And so there are a couple that are being worked on right now. That
We actually had one a couple years ago, wasn't it? That woman whose husband.
Yes, private.
one on Bemis Street.
Yes.
Yeah, Bemis.
Paulette, I think her name was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I mean, he refurbished. I mean, he had to replace some stuff that was falling apart or close to it. And he's very, very skilled. He did it exactly the way it had been. I mean, he could have done it different, and nobody would have known, but he did it incredibly.
And that's part of what we do through our certificate of appropriateness, and those in the district, then we recommend within materials that are available today, within craftsmanship that are available today, to try to keep it where are appropriate, looking like its original, or take it back to its original, if it's, like Mike said, it got far away. So that's the advantage of being in the district and adhering to guidelines that help keep the historic character. And that's what we're concerned about. There's been many changes to downtown Littleton, and we want to look again and look down a couple years from now and make sure that our buildings in Main Street, we're focusing on Main Street, and we do focus on other things, but right here tonight, to make sure that that's preserved, to keep that unique character.
Brandon?
You talked about CLG and how important it is to kind of fall under that organization going forward because of funding and other things that it affords. So that sounds like it was something that changed recently. So previously, were we able to get funding that maybe now we're no longer able to get? Is that what you're, more resources?
I don't think we're jeopardized by that because we are still a CLG. I don't think they're going to say because we're an opt-in district where they're going to say you can't be.
We're saying that opt-in districts are no longer going to be certified because of, and the reason is I spoke to the gentleman there, and he said the reason is because of the lack of parity between those in the district and not in the district. And there actually is one residential district that was grandfathered in Fort Collins, and there's a lot of issues around who's in the district and following one set of guidelines and who's not in the district. And that's why they say that is not a best practice anymore.
So we're still going to be part of the CLG, but when you say we're not certified, what?
We are certified.
Well, we should stay certified.
Yeah, there's not an issue of certification.
So why do we have to be fully opted in, I guess, or fully?
It doesn't have to do with CLG. It's just a point that this organization that oversees historical districts is no longer allowing a district to come in as an opt-in district and be certified because of the issues that they've had. We are the only commercial district in the state of Colorado.
What do you? What obstacles are you maybe beginning to see or hear of getting everyone included on Main Street right now? Have you gotten any feedback?
Yeah, it's what we talked to many of the property owners, and there's a range. There's a range from anything to apathy, like I'm fine the way I am, to in the middle, to I do not want to join the district. So there's everything. I can tell you exactly, we're talking about 18 property owners, so we're talking about a very few number. How many are in each area, I can't tell you. My best guess is half are kind of over here, here and there. We know of at least a couple property owners that are very adamant against it. And that's something to consider. If we were to go forward with this, it's a very long process. I mean, eventually, where we would go and whether it's part of the comp plan or done separately is a code change. And code changes, as you know, especially at this level, take a lot of time and resources. But there may be there's some other interim things that council may suggest we do if you want to continue us to spend our time and energy supporting this, is meeting with the planning commission, some sort of outreach to the community. I mean, I don't know, it affects the whole community, but it more impacts the property owners that would have to follow basically this set of guidelines instead of design guidelines. Because when this started in 2005, there was no guidelines. So adhering to this seemed kind of, how should I say, could appear restrictive. But then a year later, the design guidelines came in. So either way, and the guidelines are going to become standards. So that's something different to consider. But we're asking for your feedback is this something you want to support? Because eventually, if this goes to code change, it will be council. We're only recommending. Our job is only to recommend and do the footwork for you and do research for you and do whatever you need done. But eventually, it's something that you would need to consider and vote on.
One of this has come up repeatedly, as you well know. And it's a tough topic because it comes down to, in the past, we've discussed it as a property rights issue. And so that's a, people fall pretty hard on that. I think one of the things that is somewhat concerning is the economy is certainly creating a flush of development. When the economy's in the tank, nothing's going on. And downtown Littleton has been a hotspot. It's on the top list for a number of, you can talk to Denise, our economic development director, and there's a tremendous amount of interest because of everything that it is. And you can see the value of it just by the rent that is going up with a number, along downtown. There's some places that are paying almost more rent than they're paying at Aspen Grove, which is incredible. But that shows the value of that. And what is concerning is that if someone were to come in, and are they within, if one of the non-designated sold, the building sold to someone else, and they wanted to come in and just really do whatever they wanted to do, we really don't have anything outside of our existing code to prevent that. So they could remove all the historic value and create something interesting. You can drive through places, and this is residential, but you can drive through places like Observatory Park. And I mean, I just go to years when I drive through there. It's just every type of architecture you can imagine is in there, and it just looks odd. It doesn't look cohesive anymore. And so I'm between those places. I'm between the old arguments of not opt in, which still stand in many ways, and then this kind of, how do we preserve this? How in 30 years are we leaving it? Are we ensured that it will be better even than it is now, and not worse? I guess would be the thing. And so I don't know. I just waffle between those two. I've had a chat with Pam. We've met a couple times talking about how we bring this back up again, because I think the timing is good in terms of talking about it with the comp plan, with the fact that we have development going on around. You're right, it's a very, very long process. And I don't know, if we were to say investigate, if we were to say let's find out more than we know now, I think we would need to be clear with you and what that would be, what that would look like, in order to maybe make a decision as to what would we do in the next step. Or is that we stop here, that's just, okay, none of it, that's not palatable, we're done. Help me with let's call it a baby step. What would be baby step 1 and then maybe baby step 2, and you don't need to go further than that.
Well, it kind of would depend what information you need to make the next decision.
What if we don't even know what we need?
Let me add, can I add to what you said? Because like the neighborhood you mentioned, you're absolutely right. It's an interesting neighborhood, and yet the real estate values have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't keep that old thing.
Yeah.
And I think with historic downtown Littleton, it looks great, but what would happen if it was just allowed to just go totally commercial?
High rises and demolitions, and our character could be impacted.
Oh, the character definitely.
Right, and we're not saying we don't want any development, believe me. It's just the right kind of development, where you set the big part of the building back, where you have a storefront that is in character of the rest of the block. So when you walk down, you get a feeling that is different from hodgepodge and stuff like this. We are definitely pro-economic development, believe me.
Oh, yeah, well, I love the way it looks. I'm going to continue on a couple things there. Because, and Mike, you had hit on it about many years ago, the concerns. I was on a planning commission way back when historic preservation thing started up, and it was heated. I mean, this room would be packed with people. Paul was probably there, so I'm sure you were. But one of the big concerns was that the owners, property owners, were going to lose control, or were going to be, strong-armed or forced into being a part of this historic preservation mandate. And I think, Mike, you touched on it a little bit about some of the fears didn't pan out. That's something that I think you're really going to work on that a lot. Really we got to bring that forward to say these were the concerns back in the 90s that have not happened.
I would think that bringing those property owners back into a dialogue prior to this all happening, whether it happens or not, or whether you recommend it, is important. I mean,
It's just where in that process. We've talked to them individually. I mean, we've tried. And so my recommendation is, if you want more information from those 18 property owners, that we have some sort of either, open forum on a website or something where they give suggestions, or if we want to go and have a community outreach, we have a community outreach, or we have a community outreach in conjunction with something else Jocelyn's department is doing, and have that be one aspect. I mean, if that's important, and it might be very important, I'm not sure, in order for you to make a decision, or see what kind of resistance you might be up against. Because again, eventually, it's you. We're only the recommending body.
Peggy and then Karina.
I'm wondering what kind of incentives we might give to people to,
We've considered quite a few incentives, and we have some in place. And our recommendation would be, just a recommendation, it's not set in stone, that we actually get rid of the parking waiver as an incentive, because it's caused kind of havoc. But there's been other incentives like the grant program and like federal funding that have been in place for the last 12 years. So and we have also tried to do, a couple years ago we came to council with a recommendation on a tax incentive that never made it through. So it would be wonderful if you could come up with an incentive to come in, and maybe it's phased in. Maybe we give property owners another 3 months before some sort of deadline in the future to opt in, and they can take advantage of the incentives. I don't know what it looks like.
yeah,
But
just maybe even meeting with people and seeing, whether they want us to sacrifice somebody's firstborn child or.
well, and
I'm teasing.
right, there's another thing. I mean, do you want to let these people over here dictate this whole community for the next 30 years? The needs of the few, the needs of the many, and all that stuff.
Well, or do you want to let these people essentially undermine what could be beneficial, much more beneficial for them and other people? I mean, that's part of it. But I was downtown last week, I think it was, and I happened to be in one store where I got a view across the street, and what I think I saw was a facade that had a railing looking like it was a pole or something, but it was painted. It was like a fake pole or, something. Anyway, it's a fake facade. It was just a portion of it, but it's still, it just sort of, I thought, whoa, am I needing new glasses or what? And that to me, it was very noticeable and counterproductive.
That's what being in the district encourages, to be compatible.
I know that you guys have had a lot of informal conversations and have done a lot of outreach, and I think what you're really asking us now is, we've got some information, but to really take this on as a project, we need your support to say, go after this. And as far as, or at least go after this to see what this can truly be or become, or not. And as far as timing, if not now, I don't think we're going to have a later, right? So there's still something worth considering preservation for. we might find ourselves 5 years, 10 years down the road where we don't even have the option of having this conversation anymore or even this choice. So while it may be a really difficult conversation, I think this is the time we have to have that conversation and truly decide as a community, especially because we're going through a visioning process, especially because there is so much growth and pressure and development, and especially because if we don't do this now, we may lose that choice forever. So I would say, let's fight the fight now, while we still have an opportunity to at least have, a conversation around it.
Kyle and then Kara.
I would definitely lean towards supporting the recommendation right now, but I think this is, as much as those properties belong to those property owners, the entire downtown belongs to the community and belongs to all the citizens here. And I think it fits in perfectly with this visioning process where we can hear from them to say, hey, I think some of the values we've heard are we want to preserve our history. We want to preserve some of these buildings. And not everything gets preserved, but when the community says, hey, this is our #1 priority to preserve downtown and Main Street, I think that speaks volumes. It's really, really loud to hear that from everyone outside to say, hey, this is something we all can rally around. So I think that would tie right in with the consultant to come in and say, hey, this is a big topic. Let's hear what the community has to say. And as much as we focus on Main Street, and maybe that would be, if it gets to it, be the mandated historic district. I would love to see, we forget about everything outside of downtown. We forget about Alamo and Rapp and Curtis and Prince and those. That is an entire downtown. I would love to see some more focus or additional focus on those regions as well. But yeah, I think, as I think you said, it was Main Street is the signature of our history.
It starts there.
We'd like to take it in, baby steps.
Right.
That first.
No, let's do it all at once.
Carol? I agree with Karina and Kyle. Now is a fabulous time to do this with the visioning and with the economic situation, where, in a sense, nobody's going to lose financially in any of this. There are, of course, values of the property rights and the right and the like, but as you said, Pam, that property rights of whom and that extends everywhere. When I think of what has happened in just the last few years with downtown, and if we had just 1 or 2 more of those, and not on the ends but in the middle, it would be finished. There would us calling it historic downtown Littleton would just be laughable. It would be something we remember, not something we have, and so it's now we need to either do it or give up the dream. Peggy?
Do it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I ran on property rights. I believe in that, but boy, now that I hear it from this perspective, I'm thinking, just as Kyle said, it's tough because we're now talking about the community rather than just an individual owner. So but I think this is definitely worth taking taking the next step.
One of the things that we could do too is to talk to the existing owners who have opted in, and they can talk about all the benefits of that, because the benefits have been many.
Sure.
And I think it's been a huge benefit, if you will, to them as well as property owners.
Jerry?
I think one of the things we have to remember, and this is where the attorneys have to come involved sometime, is that, say it's our downtown, it's like my Denver Broncos. They're not my Denver Broncos. Emotionally, they're my Denver Broncos. Like emotionally, downtown is mine. So that's where we have to start talking about that. One of the things that I think that has made it strong as it is now is because those that are in there want to be in there. And I think over time, as it has gotten to where it is now. What was the numbers, 57 and 37?
There are 57 properties in the area and 36 lots.
61%.
So and it keeps growing, and that's going to keep going. As far as counting on federal money, the federal government is in such trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. I hate keep saying, oh, we can get money from the feds. You know, I think as a city council, we need to be responsible with more than just our money. We need to be responsible with the country's money. So I want to find a way to make it work, whether we get federal money or not. And that's what we got to keep doing. We got to get, if those other folks can get in there, we got to get them in there before there's more losses, that's for sure. So I'm in favor of moving forward.
Okay. Karina, you have another question? I want to take back a statement that I made, fight the fight, because I don't want this to be a fight. I don't want it to be perceived as that at all. And I don't want it to be the community against the property owners. And I'm going to look at Mark, when you're working with the consultants on the visioning, it's how do we have a conversation amongst the groups together, not one versus the other. So the more that there are property owners at the table as well as, civic leaders or informal or formal from the downtown area and the community and the citizens. So the more that those conversations, the more they are conversations together, and that way they begin to work with what, the gives and takes and the benefits and the negatives, the pros and the cons, then there's you develop an understanding and appreciation of both sides of the matter so that it doesn't become a one against the other. It really, to Jerry's point, you want them to want to be a part of this for their personal, for their benefit as well as the greater benefit. So that's just a comment I wanted to make sure that it really is collaborative. I think that's how.
Well, I think that's the only way it will succeed. And I think one of our other imperatives was relationships.
Yes.
And I think this is an excellent opportunity to work on those relationships and to build those relationships and create more. I think that it is a perfect time in terms of what we're doing and where we're moving. We're kind of, it's like the perfect time to paint the house is what you cleared everything out. So that's good. I think I don't really know what the logistical steps are. I think if you've got a blessing here, Mark knows where we're at with comp plan, you know the steps you need to take. So there needs to be communication. Jocelyn is nodding there. Perfect. So, Peggy, you have something you wanted to add?
And so I'm wondering, and you probably have done this, if you ask people what they want, the property owner, not necessarily the business person, right? What is it you want to do with this property that within the next 10 years or whatever? Maybe there's some way, something we can do that will facilitate what they want to do, but also enhance their compatibility with the historic character, right? I mean, so there might be something creative that none of us or they have thought of.
That's a great idea. Their 1, 5, 10-year plan of what they're going to do with that building.
And if parking is an issue, Mark and I have talked about something that I think he shared with some of you, but then there are solutions other than building big garages. Mm-hmm. So, we just go for it.
My guess is I don't need to say this, but I would like to have the HPB staff and the consultant look at other communities that have done this change, gone from an opt-in to a non-opt-in district to see, hey, what were some of the...
I don't know of any specifically.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean we couldn't find some. But I don't know of anybody that's done that in the research I've done so far.
Because we're unique and we're one of how many?
One of 60.
We're special. Okay, you have received the blessing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, whoops.
Mayor, may I?
You may not.
Taking.
I think we're talking about here, obviously tonight here, about historic preservation and design guidelines. We're going to be coming to the council here in May, sharing with you some work we did last fall about Littleton Listens. It was a broader conversation about the downtown. And as you can imagine, parking is going to be certainly one of the themes that come out of this. So I think it's another opportunity to kind of hear more about the downtown, kind of a broader perspective here. And I think you'll probably agree here that it's going to also feed into the conversation about our vision for downtown, the vision ultimately updating the comp plan. I wouldn't be surprised that through our process here, we may have to have the consultant spend additional time specifically in downtown. I think this is going to be a piece that we'll have to talk with staff about, so as we kind of sort this out. I think we just need to be kind of patient about this as it comes together, not jump right into the historic preservation, but let's make sure that we have a broader conversation about the values downtown. And again, it's all about the process. And quite honestly, it's really about the city listening, in my opinion. So if we're going to start engaging in conversations like this, we've got to listen very carefully to what people are telling us and not necessarily propose a solution up front. And so this is what this whole visioning process is about, listening carefully. So I think with that, I think that's the conversation that we as staff and certainly with other boards and commissions, we can kind of strategize about how to do that.
I think that's great. And I think that working together on this at this time is really where the energy is going to be. And what the outcome is yet to be determined. It's the same with the comp plan. But I think that having a community input on this is also going to be really important, because that's never been something we really did. So that will be very valuable. So, Steve, did you have something?
I was just going to say, certainly there's been a number of models for historical preservation across the country. I'll certainly work with Jocelyn and her staff on things like property rights, but as the city manager just said, this is something that the process becomes very important, and certainly the legal things will get integrated into that process.
Okay, great. Then do you want to talk about the sign?
Yeah, let me just make sure I'm clear. So we do have the support to continue on. Yes. But we want to work with Mark and Jocelyn to make this part of the comp plan and part of any code changes. And so is this something where you bring us into the conversation, or do we need to do some additional research or report back? I just want to make clear that I want to make sure I understand what you expect from us.
We're going to come to you. We're going to sit down with you and discuss kind of the next steps of that to make sure that it is integrated into this visioning and comp plan process.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And then if you need anything, you please let us know.
Absolutely.
We can do that at another time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Jerry?
To add another historic perspective to this thing, one time years ago, about the same time as historic preservation came along, we the planning commission were looking at pop tops on restricting them to some degree because they're popping up all over the place in the city of Littleton. But we went out and we listened to a lot of citizens because we wanted younger families. We were talking about younger families back in the 90s. I mean, nothing has changed. There's nothing over the faces. Yeah, well, now they're still wanting young. They still come. I was young in the 90s. They still come and go. So was I. And but what we found out is that restricting pop tops was a wrong. It's a New England thing. You don't put the R in there. So we realized it was the wrong way to go, because we went around, we took pictures of like those areas like you were talking, Observatory Park, Wash Park, and those houses they were very different. The neighborhoods changed, but value-wise, they had just gone nuts. And so I think listening to citizens of Littleton, we ended up just dropping it all together. So I think it's going to be real important on this thing too. And that was part of the other thing, is that when property owners, especially in downtown, they're the ones with the skin in the game, and when they had the appearance that they were being strong-armed and having to do something they did not want to do, just because they were being told they had to. So that's why it's going to be real important on how you present this, on what it has done, what are the people that are in it, the folks that are in it, because they're the property owners. Just because we don't want things to happen, we're not the property owners, and Steve can tell us all about takings.
And I think the key is being collaborative.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Real quickly on the signs, we have looked into having a sign that illustrates a little bit about the history of downtown Littleton for people walking by. And we thought we would look at something in Vega Park. We could get a grant, but it's a grant that has to be co-funded with the city. So we're looking to see if you would consider putting in the budget for next year about $1,000 to $1,500 for a sign. And I can't tell you what it's going to look like because we've got 14 different choices at this point, but it would be some sort of sign standing up, maybe in Vega Park, outlining the history of Littleton in some fashion and maybe a couple buildings. And there's no point in us getting bids, getting more, specific bids or filing a grant if that's not something you think you can find in the budget next year.
What's the grant deadline?
The one we're looking at that has it 2 times, one's November and I think the other one's February.
Okay.
And grants take a long time to do, so we want to make sure that we have some lead time.
And it's specific for signs?
There's a lot of things you can apply for, but the one we would apply would be for the sign. But they would only give us half the money and expect the city to pay the other.
And tell me, once again, what is the sign going to say? What's the content?
We don't know yet. We're just presenting you a conceptual solution at this point. And the sign would talk something about the history of Littleton and maybe highlight some buildings. And we would work with the Littleton Museum on the copy, and we could get you more definitive. We would decide on a recommendation.
Make it very modern looking and
We have that one already.
Well, to tie in, not to...
modern features.
Modern feature. I was thinking, this probably would blow the budget, but some sort of interactive or smart technology that goes into the sign, because a static sign that's just there only contains so much information. But if
and you're right. I don't know that then we're really talking about a lot of dollars, a big budget, and we're also talking about there's maintenance issues, that impact staff. So.
Just something to consider.
I don't think it's a bad idea, but we're asking for something pretty old school.
But the Longmont one is pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be lovely, but I think $1,000, $1,500. If you think there's more money in the budget and we can go bigger, we will definitely look into it.
It's a matching grant.
We're starting into rent already. We got some roads to take
Is there
care of.
any objection from council to have this in the budget, Karina?
I think I have an objection. I'm not fully supportive of this, not because of the idea, but we have lots of signs downtown now that are funded by the city. Those signs were designed to kind of bridge the old and the new, so that we have built-in historical elements to it. Maybe the execution isn't where we would necessarily want it to be. We have some they're like blocks that have history on them in front of the Town Hall Art Center, in front of the Carnegie building. So I just not compelling enough for me right now, given that we've already made some significant investments in signage downtown. Part of that process included bringing in some historical elements, and we're going to be dealing with sign code changes coming up soon. So I just don't feel it's imperative at this point. I could be convinced otherwise, but right now I don't know that I could support that.
I am inclined not to if we don't have, you mentioned it's a solution, and what I thought right away of what problem is this a solution to?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. We just wanted to highlight the history of Littleton, and we initially thought we would do plaques and realized that the plaques that are already in downtown, which were not funded, in those cases were funded by the forerunner of HLI, the Second Century Fund, were good enough for the buildings. So we wanted to do something general so people would realize it was in a historic downtown district. I mean, you can look around, but it's like when you walk to Crested Butte or Telluride, oh, here's some history. Oh, this is an historic town. So it's for the visitors to come.
I'm going to stick with a principle of when you have something big to buy, like street repairs, don't spend your money on small things that will keep you from getting the big thing. So I'm even though it's a great idea, I'm going to go for street repairs instead. Jerry?
I'm okay with moving forward with some conceptual idea on it.
I think it's a good idea to move forward. I think it's good marketing. If there's something to draw more people in here, to get more people to come spend more money and raise the tax base, I think that it's good. When you go down there right now, there's nothing to tell you about the history of Littleton, other than when you drive in, you see historic downtown Littleton. So I'm supportive.
Yeah, I think our website does a pretty good job of telling the history of Littleton. I'm in Carol's corner on this one. I think I'd rather see our money go towards the bigger projects out there. And also, I don't think it would be that difficult to raise the extra $1,000, $1,500 on a fundraiser of some sort that get behind something like that rather than have the city.
I think downtown speaks for itself in many ways, and having a sign almost contradicts the very essence of downtown. But having a very nice, accessible something on your cell phone that can tell you bunches of things as you're downtown.
We have that already.
I know, but maybe more, whatever. Maybe something down, maybe we get the merchants to say, to encourage the merchants to talk more about their building or whatever and say, hey, do you know about such and such? Not that they necessarily want to send somebody to a competing business, but they certainly can promote. This is part of having been tons of places in the country, even when I was growing up and we could afford to drive any place, and you get there and it spoke for itself, and we talked to the people and they tell us their story. And that was much more than it's like the sign contradicted the essence, if that makes any kind of logical sense.
Okay. So we have 4 no on the sign, so no sign.
I just had one clarifying question. You needed the city's support. This isn't going to go forward with raising $1,000 from the merchants.
No, this is a dead, this just died.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. Well, I was just
Next. The only thing we can get is a grant, and if the grant will only co-fund, I realistically think that we don't do fundraising, but
maybe down in the future.
I would suggest, and because I don't want to throw water on an idea, and I like that you guys are thinking in those ways, and I want you to keep thinking in those ways. And maybe part of what you're hearing tonight is maybe could you stretch further than to put a plaque in Vega Park? What would that look like? Historic downtown Littleton has some pretty cool stories. And what could it start to look like? And is it something that you could actually, I'd like to really see what that would start to look like before we, decide whether we want to give money. And I know that's some work to do.
And we're doing it one-on-one with our historic tours that are going to continue on Friday nights. And, as needed for Littleton leadership, all sorts of things, and when conferences come. So we do one-on-one stuff. It's just the thought was to have something where that immediately hit me, this is, like the other historic downtowns have.
It might be cool to actually hook up with the Fine Arts Committee and talk to them. They do
They have
commission.
money?
Yeah, they have money.
Yeah.
And they're
They have money.
But they commission art in the city. So it may even be an opportunity for you guys to collaborate with them to come up with something kind of cool that would be public art, but would also serve your purpose and could could maybe.
Great idea.
And their focus is starting to be on outdoor art.
Okay,
Installations.
that's a great suggestion. We will definitely explore that. Thank you.
Collaboration, relationships, communication.
Good ideas, creative ideas. We're there.
Manager, yes.
Sorry, Mayor, can just want to make a comment here. I think one of the things I've been talking with our finance director, Tiffany Hooten, about is to actually develop a more formal grant management process. We don't have one here. And we are anticipating that we are going to be applying for DRCOG specifically. And a lot of times in a budget process, we may make an estimate about what the grant could be, but when it actually comes time to make an application is the time for which, in my opinion, we need to bring it before council for you to decide yes or no. So that the detail is actually there. You understand the commitment. And I'm thinking of these larger grants. So this is something that you'll likely see as a policy here sometime this fall when we talk about the budget.
Mark, I mean, going into priority-based budgeting, we start talking more broadly, and it's not this little project, it's this project in the scope of kind of a bigger umbrella of engaging the community, or a bigger umbrella of, promoting our culture. So priority-based budgeting will begin to bring some of these different pieces together.
Correct. Yeah, I'll give you a different context to kind of view all this. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of new things for you here this fall. So this is one tool.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you, guys.
We hope to meet with you again whenever it's appropriate.
Absolutely, we will. We'll make breakfast next time.
Okay, whatever. There.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming. Okay, council, want to jump on into the next one?
Good.
All right.
We're way off schedule.
We're way out schedule. That's all right. We got
Yes, the city attorney.
So, the city attorney is going to do a kind of the daily usage of Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules is, where's your book? Hold up your book.
Right here.
Here's the condensed version of it. But and Robert's Rules was actually written for a broad range of meetings, not just a council meeting, but all types of meetings, and it kind of creates a sense of order around the structure and the communication in those meetings. We've always adopted it as kind of a guide, and most communities have done that, where they find some things work for their community and some things don't, and so you can tweak it to what works. The key to its success is that everybody understands what the rules are. And you don't have to read this book, and you don't have to read Steve's book, but and a lot of the things, and some of the things that we're not going to dive into tonight are things that may happen once a year or never. And those and they can get kind of complicated. And in those instances, it's really up to myself as the presiding officer to understand at least how to navigate those waters, and then to use the city attorney as a resource to help with that, so that we don't all go upside down in the ditch over an issue at the dais that we can't figure out. So what we're going to kind of walk through tonight, and I would encourage you guys to ask questions. If there's something you don't understand or you don't get why is it, let's talk through it and make sure that at the end of this everybody is really clear, because it is important for us to run our meetings as best as we can. I don't know if maybe that's the wrong language. As good as we can. As well as we can.
As best.
And because one of the things that is happening that I don't know that we all really recognize it, but our other boards and commissions are watching that. And so when we start to go down a path where we may be doing something wrong, they start doing it wrong. And they're like, but council does it that way. Well, if everybody jumped off the bridge, would you? So we really do set the example. So Steve, you want to get going?
Okay, with that, Robert's
Sorry.
Rule.
So what we have on Granite, because I know there's been revisions throughout the day and I haven't had a chance to pull them up. If I go to Granicus and pull up the PowerPoint.
Is this updated?
This was updated earlier today, yes.
Should just hit the refresh button and it should.
If I'm on Granicus now, I have the latest and greatest.
I'm going to pull it up myself and we'll take a peek.
Okay.
So let me give you some background. The city of Middleton actually has what it calls council rules of legislative procedure. And what those are, the Colorado Municipal League several years ago adopted what they call Bob's Rules of Order. Now, where did Bob's Rules of Order come from? There happens to be a longtime member of the Colorado Municipal League Executive Board by the name of Bob Winder, who happens to be the Centennial City Attorney. Bob is one of the people in this state who is considered an expert on parliamentary procedure, so he wrote a very abbreviated set of legislative rules, which most cities in the state have adopted. And what those rules also provide for is that they are very general and that you refer to Robert's rules to cover those items that are not addressed. So when you go on the city's website, you will see under City Council tab, Council Rules of Legislative Procedure. Those are the Middleton version of Bob's Rules. And if you were to go to a number of other cities in Colorado, you would see very similar rules that they have adopted, all derived from this model that the Colorado Municipal League created. Now, Robert's Rules, as the mayor alluded to, it's some 800 pages. It's very fascinating. It has all kinds of rules that were really designed for large conventions and large bodies. In fact, the author of Robert's Rules, a gentleman by the name of Henry Roberts, who was a general during the Civil War, wrote it because he thought after the Civil War there were no rules for parliamentary procedure and that the country would benefit by having rules for parliamentary procedure. The real fact that I would tell you the key here is both your legislative rules and Robert's Rules are really designed to make you effective. That's the whole point of this. It isn't that it's designed to say you shall or you shouldn't make a particular policy choice. It's designed to have this body operate in an effective manner. So, Robert's Rules do talk about general conduct of a meeting, and then our legislative rules get into more detail. The rules for this body, and for most bodies, are a quorum is a majority. Now, sometimes jurisdictions will enact rules where a quorum will be less than a majority. But if it's silent, a quorum is always a majority. And a meeting is always called to order by the chair. Now, in this case of the city council, the chair is the mayor. And the mayor calls that meeting to order. Now, one of the points that we do here, I would note some bodies dispense with it, is we actually do a roll call for each meeting. Some bodies, the presiding officer will actually just ask the clerk to note the roll. That's a choice of the presiding officer. It's more traditional in governments to do an actual physical roll call, but it's not something that is required. Now, when we have public comment, one of the most important things is that the presiding officer does an opening statement. And one of the reasons for that opening statement, and that's kind of a process that we have moved to, because I would tell you in a number of our bodies, we were having public comment, and then we were also having discussion by the members of the body on public comment. As your lawyer, I have a big problem with that. The Colorado Open Meetings Law is very specific. You may not discuss items unless they're on your agenda. So public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to come before the body, be recognized by the chair, and provide a statement of information to the body on an issue that they think is important. But it's not a time to discuss the item. And I don't think the council, since I've been here, has gone off, but we've had a couple of boards where that has happened, and we've had to say, no, don't do that. And as the mayor did allude to, a few times those boards have said, well, the council used to do this in the past. And it's like, well, that may be, but the fact that maybe we didn't do things as good as we should have doesn't mean that we should keep on doing them that way. It just means whatever happened, happened.
Well, if I may chime in, because there was one the other night in a couple of the meetings where one of us would respond to one of the citizens just to make a comment to them. Is that out of line then, you're saying?
As long as it doesn't, normally what my recommendation would be that if it's something where the citizen's asking for information, I'd recommend that you say to the city manager, or if you think it's more law related to me, would you please make sure you get with the citizen on that? If it's occasionally, sometimes it would just simply be a citizen might raise something like, well, is there going to be a meeting in 2 weeks? It's certainly fine for the normally through the presiding officer to say, well, no, there won't be a meeting in 2 weeks. But if you're beginning to get into a discussion on anything that looks like an action item, you're going to have your city attorney look at you and say, no, this is an action item, we're not on the agenda. If council wants to discuss it, we will work through the mayor and manager and place that on a subsequent agenda.
So a simple response to a question is okay?
Yeah, if it's just a response where you're not getting into a discussion on an action item. And what is important here is Robert's rules envisions that the chair presides over the meeting. Now, we haven't had it here, but I've represented governing bodies where we'll have multiple members of the governing bodies all talking at once. You will not be popular with your city clerk when you do that, because you make it really hard for the clerk to take the minutes. The second thing is you really violate Robert's rules. What the proper process is, the mayor presides over the meeting. If you wish to make a comment, you would normally just say mayor, and the mayor would recognize you. Many times, you can just turn and look at the mayor, and the mayor recognizes that you want to be recognized. But the proper process is to have the chair recognize members. And one of the reasons for that is everybody's comments here are important. So if we have Councilmember Cole and Councilmember Elbart and Councilmember Driscoll all talking at the same time, we don't get the benefit of your comments. And so the mayor is kind of the person who's to make sure that one person at a time. And I understand everyone says that never happens. I wish I could say that with governing bodies. More than once I've had city clerks come to me and say, I have 3 council members who are all talking at the same time, and I don't know what to put in the minutes. And so that's why the role of the chair is so important.
Steve, can I just add, the meeting, it's all about the floor. And so who has the floor? So who has been given permission, for lack of a better word, to have the floor? And that is that's the only person that can speak, be it a citizen, an applicant, staff, and council. And so that's why it's important that if you guys, and we do a pretty good job of it, a lot of dioceses have lights. So if you want to speak, you hit your light and it shows up, and so then I know. So you're not trying to get my attention, which is, we're challenged that way. I mean, we're figuring it out, but it is challenging. And so I think that, so sometimes there may be a just want to jump in, but that, again, that's not recommended. Try to bring it back. If you guys have suggestions or a better way, if I'm not catching you, let me know, because we're doing it without technology at this point. Carol?
Well, I would like to say that it seems you're doing an excellent job, have been all along, at noticing when people want to speak, acknowledging them, and then managing the traffic, and it's just gone so well. Thank you.
Now, under the city's legislative rules, and Robert's rules really doesn't talk much about public hearings, so this really comes from the city's legislative rules. Public hearings, and we have these in 2 different capacities, and this gets kind of confusing, because we have public hearings in what we call quasi-judicial capacity.
Sorry, I have to go back.
Okay.
You said to ask questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Going back to the consent agenda, including first readings, those are two separate things on our agenda. There's consent agenda, which is nothing more than saying we consent to having this on the agenda for the upcoming meeting, correct?
Well, consent agenda, Councilmember Elrod, members of the council, really the consent agenda is where you're taking a group of items and you're acting on them as a group because they are viewed as routine and they can be acted on as a group because they are routine. Now, the difference with first reading is, under our charter, first reading is limited to three purposes. There's only three things the council is to be doing on first reading. One, you approve the introduction of the ordinance. Two, you direct its publication as introduced. And three, you set it for a public hearing. Now, again, I'm going to be very candid here. In the past, the first reading in terms of the charter hasn't necessarily been followed. That's fine. Whatever happened in the past, happened in the past. But the charter envisions that you only do those three things. The charter envisions that you would discuss the substance of the ordinance at second read after you've approved its initial introduction, because at second read, under our charter, it says that an ordinance is to be introduced for a second time. The council will hold a public hearing and the council will discuss it. So the intent is, and why you would see items on first reading on the consent agenda is, you're limited to those very three things and nothing more. And because that's routine, it's on consent agenda. Now, if council doesn't feel an ordinance should be introduced, the proper process is to say to the mayor, I would like you to pull this from the consent agenda. It's pulled from the consent agenda. Council can vote down the introduction of the ordinance. And that essentially ends it. The ordinance has not been introduced and therefore goes no further. But first reading is not a time to discuss the merits of the ordinance. It's a time only to do those three things and nothing more. Second read is when you discuss the merits. Now, sometimes people have said to me in other jurisdictions, but city attorney, if at second read, what if we don't like it? If you don't like it, there's nothing that says you have to vote on it in second read. You can send it to a study session, you can carry it over, you can direct it come back with changes. Second read, there's nothing that says because it's on an agenda for second read, you must pass it. But that's where you act on it.
So on a first reading, it does not change at all, not one word, until the second reading is exact same as the first.
Mayor Pro Tem, no. What the charter says is, that it's to be reintroduced, introduced anew for the second read. So the purpose of this is that the first read, why it directs publication, is to let the public know council's considering an ordinance that relates to this item. Now, I would tell you my practice is that if there's changes between first and second read, I will always, usually would do a supplemental council communication saying, by the way, there have been some changes between first and second read based on either a study session or based on information. I will tell you that there's been a change. Now, if there's a substantive change between first and second read, council is very free to say, well, we don't want to proceed with the reintroduction of the ordinance at this point in time. We want to refer to a study session.
Like the wildlife one.
Like the wildlife.
Yeah.
And that was an example where council said, after first read, we're not ready to go to second read. We want to do something else.
No, we took it to second, and second was pulled.
But at that point, it was...
And then it was pulled.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Wildlife ordinance being an example, it puzzled me how I, as one council member, had the power I'll use to change that ordinance so significantly between first read and when it came up for second read. I didn't know what I was doing, but I talked to you and got 3 very significantly things changed, which when we got further down the trail didn't seem right. I'm saying it didn't seem right that I got to do that.
Councilmember Fay, members of the council, I think my view of it is if you're asking for a substantive change, that needs to be heard by the whole council. Now, sometimes I will have council members come in and say, your syntax on something or whatever, I don't view those as substantive. But if I agree with you, if there's a substantive change and a council member's asking for it, the whole council needs to see that. A good example, one that's coming up to you is that I've had a couple of council members mention to me that there was some grammatical errors in the special event ordinance, and they are not substantive. There was some commas missing and a couple of hyphens, and yes, that you will see them corrected in the second read.
That's not what I mean.
I know, I understand.
At all.
Right.
No.
But I understand what you're saying, which is that on substantive items, the council should hear it as a whole.
And what's the process for that to happen?
And what the process for that to happen is that if a council member comes to me and wants a substantive change, then what I would normally...
When you say come to you, what do you mean?
I mean, they would either call me up, they would come in for an appointment, and they would ask something that I view as a substantive change. Then what I would do is I would go to the mayor and say, Mayor, I have this request for a substantive change.
He passes it off all the time.
And I would say, how would you like, as the presiding officer, do you want me to ask you to refer this to a study session? Do you want me to have this and discuss it at second read and then let the council decide? And so normally, because it's already been set for second read, it would come to second read unless the council votes to continue it. But any significant change, I'm going to want to discuss with all of you. If it's grammar, no. Significant change, yes.
So
now,
you're saying you would discuss it at the second
read? At the second read, if the council wishes to discuss it, if the council wishes to put it over to the study session, that is a council prerogative. I mean, sometimes council may say, well, since we're already here, let's discuss it and let's review it. Other times, council may say, no, I prefer a study session. And
we have a couple places where we can prevent kind of those things happening. So the fact that we take some of these larger issues and flesh them out at a study session first, and then the next thing, then from the study session, we direct staff what direction we want them to go. Then, if it does end up on an agenda, it's usually on a first read, and at that point, we've got the information on a Thursday, and we have time to look at it. We've got issues or problems with it, then we do the email to Steve. And that email questions or comments, and then he shares that email back, so we have that evenness. So you may be sending your issue, but the answer is coming back to all of us, so we all know what's going on. And then when we get to first read, if there was time to update the packet, the information, it's done. If not, then we ideally would pull it off, update that, I think, in that instance, so that we all know what that looks like, what we are approving. Then that would be pull it from consent to make sure that that this is included in here, and then motion it motion the back in to take it to public hearing. Then it goes there. It's 2 weeks in between there, and particularly in a rezone, you can have some disasters happen. You can have a developer have something come up, or you can have an issue one way or another. There's a sewer thing nobody knew about or whatever. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen. And so then those 2 weeks in there can be changes. In that instance, there has to be constant communication on what's going on with that. And then at that point, when it's at the public hearing, anything that can be updated in the packet so that it's before the meeting has to be done. And then at the meeting, we get to hear anything that wasn't. And so it is at that point, sometimes you do end up with information you didn't have prior, only because it was unavoidable to do that. Everything is done to prevent that. But in those instances, you do deal with it raw. And we can, at second reading, we can postpone it, put it back in a study session. Sometimes with a rezone, not always feasible, but it may just take some more dialogue between council and staff during the meeting to work through those issues.
If we have substantive changes between the first reading when it's published and the second reading, how does the public know there have been substantial changes and that they would?
Because
The
after
changes,
adoption, it has to
Steve
be
makes the
published.
changes.
So the public needs to go into the packet but the public isn't notified that there's a change. So they would need to read the whole ordinance to see if something changed.
If I may, I think just from a technical perspective, if there is a change between the first and the second, what I suggested to council here some time back is that we would actually have a strikeout version in the packet so the public can see whatever the changes are, and then also a clean version accepting the strikeouts.
So that will be common practice.
Yes, correct.
And that shows up that, whatever kind of stuff's going on between those 2 weeks. When the packet is published, it will have all of that in there. If there's something that happens after that we can't get it on soon enough, then it is shared first thing at the meeting. Staff has always shared it first thing, and there are handouts and whatever for information. But it'll be the first time we see it and the first time the public sees it in those instances.
Just one other comment. I know Steve's going to get to it towards the end of this process, but if you have a substantial change, and I think as the mayor said, this is going to take a little bit of conversation among the council and the staff, but as the staff starts to see something that's substantial, instead of making the change between first and second, we actually may work with the council member who's interested to propose an amendment, a formal process that at the second. In fact, that's kind of what we did here. Kind of the fire issue.
Right.
So I know Steve's going to touch on that. It's a judgment call trying to decide what is really substantial versus.
And I think finally, even if there's like some, what I would call grammatical correction, you will actually see both the red line as well as the clean version in your council packet. And the idea is that even with grammatical corrections, I want you to see both. One of the things that probably is a bit different in the last year is we have done an awful lot of legislating in terms of bringing legislation to you. We have about every meeting had an ordinance on the agenda for you to consider. And that is a much heavier burden of legislation than what has existed in the past. And so that does, from a staff standpoint, we're having to make some adjustments to that because quite candidly, we're doing a lot more than what we've done in the past.
And I will add that I think council, we have a responsibility to this process, and that's called doing our homework. And I feel like this council is very good at that you guys, there are councils that don't read their packet. We've had some council members that we know have not even opened their packets. And it's kind of hard to hide. But you guys are good. You do, and we see a lot more early questions, which gives staff a lot more time to give us good answers back. And it is that synergy that helps to create where we really do make the best policy. When that isn't happening, it is hard to make good policy. So having us prepared help staff be prepared, and then when we get to a meeting, it's a lot easier. And the public sees that too. It's a bunch of unprepared council people. That's a real fun meeting to watch.
So I'm going to summarize for me, because I asked the question first and I didn't understand, so I just want to make sure I understand now. At the first reading, we can pull something from first reading to ask for clarification or a change or addition, modification. If I ask for a change or a modification, the council has to approve it, or that's not an option?
You could pull something from first reading for those purposes if you couldn't have handled that prior to first reading. If it's something that has to be done on first reading, the ideal is to try not to pull things off first reading. So council, what you would do, so let's say it's not a, let's say it's not a first reading. Let's say it's something else. Let's say, okay, here's an example that actually happened. It is approval of the victim's assistant liaison to the police department, and that was on consent agenda. Jerry pulled it because he wanted to hear the chief give a accommodation of sorts, or a blessing to that person. Now, that Jerry could have asked the chief to have done that prior and been included in our packet, or left it on first reading, but he didn't. So he pulled it off, he did that, then he put it back on, we approved it as is. In my opinion, that's a frivolous poll. Sorry, Jerry.
A what?
Frivolous poll. That could have been handled prior. If there is something that popped up that you have a real concern with this, and you pull it for that reason, and you share that concern, which could change the vote, that's a stronger reason to pull consent.
I think in regards to that, when I pulled, is that question that comes up at that meeting or before that meeting, I don't think it's frivolous at all. Any council member has a right to pull up anything.
No, they do.
To have something addressed, as I did. And it wasn't substantial of any sort. It was a clarification in a way. And I think any council member has that authority to do that.
Absolutely. I didn't say that you don't.
You said frivolous, and I think
I said, in my opinion, it
right.
was.
And I'm saying, whether you think it's frivolous or not, any council member can do that.
Right, those are two different points.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So we have your 3 reasons that we can, that we should be doing it first reading.
Yes.
And so and none of the things that Karina mentioned are one of those 3 things. So how does Karina do one of the 3 things she wants to do?
Let me answer that question. Yes, there's only 3 purposes for first read. But if, for example, Councilmember Elrod has a concern about an ordinance on first read, there's a couple of choices. One choice is to pull it and make a motion to reject the first reading. The other...
Without giving a reason.
If it's pulled from consent, and then when it comes to the mayor calls it, there'll be council discussion on the motion, and she can indicate why she believes it should not be introduced.
So there would be discussion on the...
If it's pulled from consent.
Oh my goodness, that's not on the list.
The other would be if Councilmember Elrod felt, well, yes, it's a substantive change, but I like the concept. What I have seen council members do is they pull it from consent. When the mayor calls it for discussion, the council member goes, I like the concept of this. I want it to go ahead, but I don't think it's worked out. And Mayor, would you consider referring this to a study session before we go to second read? And that can be done. But
that can be done as a council decision too.
Yeah, they don't.
If she has the decision, the majority support,
She just has to make a motion, not ask.
Right.
You just have to make a motion, but I mean, the reason I recommended going to the presiding officers is obviously if the presiding officer knows that's what you want to do, things get more efficient. And this is really about the functioning of the body. How do we make the body function in the most effective, efficient way possible?
And where does this discussion come in?
Where this comes in
Go back here and point where it goes.
Where it says consent agenda including first readings. Using Councilmember Elrod's question, what would happen is she would look at the consent agenda and say, we have a first reading on an ordinance, and I'm going to use the wild guy and I like the concept, but I think it needs more work. So I'm going to pull this from the consent agenda. The mayor goes, okay, this item will then be dealt with after we finish the consent agenda, and the mayor calls the item, and at that point, Councilmember Elrod says, you know, I like the concept of this, but I think it needs more work. I'm going to make a motion that this be continued over to a study session where we as the council can discuss it and then provide direction to the city attorney as to how we want to go.
And that's it.
And that's it? Council votes on that?
And then when she makes the motion and then she gets a second, then it belongs to the floor, and that's when you can discuss it. So then that's even when Karina could explain more, or if you had a question about what she was asking, you could talk. So that's where discussion, and when discussion's over, we vote.
Then where does this fit into, on first reading, we can only three things?
Essentially, where it fits in is because you're only doing those three things: introduction, publication, or setting a public hearing. By carrying it over, what you're doing is...
I'm talking about the discussion part.
Yeah, the discussion part, because you've pulled it from consent, it's now an item for discussion. There's now going to be a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and carry it over to a study session for further discussion prior to a second read. And what would occur is the council would have discussion on that motion. It'd be on the floor, and based on council's action, if council says yes, we as a body think that's the appropriate thing, then council would vote. It would then be carried over to a study session, and it would not proceed to second reading until the council's had the study session.
Essentially, I don't know, maybe this will clear it up a little bit. Introduction, publication, and public hearing, those three things, that's what it stays on. If you pull it off,
Okay, if you pull it off, the rules change.
If you pull it off, if you leave it on, what you're approving on first reading is the introduction, publication, and public hearing. If you yank it, then it's a new topic. It's why did you yank it, and then we talk about that.
So then the other night when Peggy pulled the fire ordinance, then we weren't operating under these three rules. Like the attorney said, the attorney then after she pulled it and then got it
on first reading?
On consent. She pulled it from consent, then we passed the consent agenda, then we came back to Peggy's pulling it. There wasn't a motion. The attorney, when Jerry then tried to talk after Peggy did, said the only reason for first reading is these three things. But we were having discussions for a pulled first.
The minute they pulled it, those three things disappeared.
Yet the attorney was saying we're only doing those three things, and he couldn't answer Jerry's questions because we're only dealing with those three things. Jerry insisted, and he dealt with them. But then we came to my turn, or what could have been my turn, and we couldn't have the discussion. I couldn't discuss because it wasn't one of those three things.
Was this before a motion was made?
Yes.
That's discussion can't until after a motion is second.
Exactly. But we were having it anyway.
And will that be...
Well,
in that case, we were.
Well, and quite honestly, Peggy pulled it because of a wording issue, I think.
It was a word change.
Jerry had a couple of questions, which...
clarification type things, yeah.
Clarification things. Those, and again...
So shall we just
really
take that back and say that's history, and
well,
from here on...
And part of it was, and I mean, let's be honest, part of it was that Jerry and Peggy and I, we spent 2 years on a council that operated it with you could do whatever you wanted on that stuff. And we're trying to kind of rein that in.
It was that way.
It wasn't really the right time.
And I've been watching council for 2 years, and so I was with you as far as
it was more than 2 years. It goes way back.
No, I mean
planning commissions did it. City councils have done it for decades.
And we're just trying to, because you can see what happens when that happens.
Yeah, it used to be first readings. Always discussions. And it was ridiculous almost because it was like a full discussion that we're going to have again in 2 weeks.
And council, let me just say something here. Even if you pull it off of first read, again, that doesn't change the purposes of first read in the charter. It's still those same 3 purposes. Now, you may say, okay, I don't want this to proceed directly to second read, so I'm going to request a study session. But I'm going to ask you very respectfully, please don't put your lawyer in the position of wanting to discuss the merits on first read. Because you're basically asking me to violate the charter, and I can't do that. That's not...
So we can pull it, but the discussion, we're not going to get into a discussion of the various merits.
On the merits.
I'm pulling it. There are some matters that I want to bring, that I want to resolve or clarify, etc. But I'm not going to do it right. We're not going to have a hearing right then and there. It's just asking for it. I'm taking it to a study session.
Ideally not pull it at all, just keep moving.
That's why it's easier to deal with these issues before the council meeting, so you get those questions answered, so you don't risk the pulling of it.
I mean, the things you're dealing with, those 3 things, say you pull because you're not going to be at the meeting, the proposed second reading, and you want to be there for that discussion. You can say, I'm pulling it because it's set for this date. I would like it to be for a different date because that's dealing with.
That's perfectly appropriate because that's setting a public hearing, and you can. There's no requirement it has to be at the next meeting. It can't be any sooner than the next meeting, but you could conceivably have an ordinance that you act on at the next meeting, which would be April. May.
2 regular meetings away.
And you might not actually have the second meeting until June. There's nothing that prohibits that in the charter. It's just that you can't have it any sooner than the next meeting following the first meeting. But many times, there'll be some reason that council may not want to have 8 public hearings. Perfectly fine. So you stagger them out.
Some of them, though, we can't change. Some of them, we get kind of stuck. Somebody needs us to have that approval by a certain date, so we get stuck in there. But other those that can, we can do it.
I'm good playing by this rule. I'm good with it.
Okay, Carol, do you have
Another hypothetical. So we have a packet that has a new ordinance on consent. And Karina sees something in it she doesn't. She's not real certain of, like you were mentioning there. And then what does she do? Does she contact you?
Yes.
And then you make her change?
If it's before first read and she has a question, if she contacts me, because I will then make that change unless I think that there's something that's a legal issue or whatever. If it's most of the changes I get from council members are just, honestly, there's the syntax. I don't like the way this paragraph reads, or I'm not sure what this means. A good example was the question, what does it mean to harass wildlife? I'll be honest, as the lawyer, I looked at the state statute definition and said, okay, this is a very consistent definition, but I completely understand where you, as an elected official, may say, I need a little bit more than what the state statute says.
So then you do what she suggests, and then do you republish it?
And because it's happened before first read, it will be published as however council adopts it on first read. Now, if I made a significant change before, and it's already in the packet, what I'm going to do is, you're going to see that.
What's that?
You're going to see it.
It'll still go to first reading.
So it's already, I'm not asking you, I'm asking him.
Okay, I think the city manager wants to weigh in here too.
Just from a practical standpoint, if we're coming out of a study session and we've talked about a particular topic.
Okay, it's coming out of a study session, we've seen it before.
You've seen it before, and...
You bring up your concern then.
I'm actually the one that brings up concerns pretty early and asks a lot of questions.
Actually, you've all been pretty good at it.
And you guys chastise me for it.
No.
Tease me.
No, we are teasing you right now.
But if we come come out of a study session and for which, we've had a draft ordinance and there's perhaps some changes there that was suggested, before the packet goes out on Thursday, I would request that you actually contact Steve or I if you have some additional questions or concerns. Because once we put the packet out on Thursday, I really would like to be done with it before first read. If for some reason you've got issues with it beyond that Thursday date, then I think Steve and I are going to have to ponder, well, do we recommend to council that we pull it here off of first read and actually go to a study session?
Okay.
So Thursday to me really is a cutoff date. I really don't want to make changes after Thursday.
Well, but sometimes what we discuss Tuesday doesn't look like what shows up on Thursday.
That's so true.
And I don't mean that bad, it's just slippage.
It feels like a line from Popeyes.
Then, and if I may, then the question would be is how substantial is it? Is it,
And that's,
is it of a minor issue where you can allow it to go to first read and then we deal with it between the first and the second? Or is it substantial enough where we just flat miss something, and then if that's the case, we need to know it, because then we're back to the issue about whether or not we pull and do something back to study session or something.
because with me, it's also part of our contract, so to speak, with the public, our agreement with the public, that they clearly know that something has changed. Mm-hmm. If they were paying attention to the study session, they would not necessarily know that this change got made. So
Exactly.
It's a very important trust issue, I think.
Exactly. I think that's my point. That's why I'm asking. If you've got concerns, questions, or comments, I need to hear that before the Thursday date. Otherwise, I think it gets a little difficult managing the change and communicating back to the public what's going on.
But sometimes you don't know that it doesn't translate till you
We don't
see
get
it.
the packet till Thursday.
I don't know if that's realistic.
Message is the sooner the better.
Well, it is. But
I mean, there's always an opportunity.
But some people's schedules vary considerably. Jerry works full-time, some other people work full-time, and you don't get to look at the darn thing until Friday night, Saturday, or sometimes
Oh, it
Sunday.
comes out Thursday.
Comes out
Almost
Thursday.
Almost always.
So there's really no,
Yes. So, I think what it does is it really puts more responsibility on all of us. First, the council at a study session, making sure we have good, thorough conversation and answering all your questions. It also puts a lot of responsibility on staff to make sure we take notes and have a clear understanding about where are we going to really minimize those problems so that when we do get to the Thursday packet date, we're all pretty confident that we've got it. And so, obviously we're never perfect here, but
And I think the law or the rule that we have to have it posted, how many hours before the meeting? Is it 24?
Yes. Now,
So if we have to make a change, I mean, as long as it's still posted for the public 24 hours ahead, as it is going to appear at the meeting.
So it would be nice if we get close to the 24-hour deadline before the change gets made, to put out on Nextdoor or something or other on our social media that there's been a change and such and such.
let me weigh in.
Well,
The beam will light up in the sky.
I'm just saying,
Let me weigh in.
you got to click your heels.
people have, if it's been posted, people have looked at it, and then suddenly they show up at a meeting and it's not what they had looked at and maybe printed out.
We're not, there's ownership on the public too. If they are interested in that, we have a 24-hour thing. Most of the time, the stuff we post first stays right through the meeting and nothing changes. But there will be those occasions, and that's just part of.
Then we need to make sure the public understands. Always check by whatever day or time or something or other, because sometimes there are changes. I just think it's fair that people know what the rules are.
And in response, let me answer a couple of things here. First, one of the things that you'll see at council meetings is we have recently developed a new Citizens Guide to Council Meetings, and one of the things we talk in there is about how council works in terms of first read, second read. Now, the important thing that Mark alluded to is the ordinance that we publish at first read, we have to publish in advance. We have to have that posted. So what I would ask you is that he hit the nail on the head. If we can deal with something before we put it in the packet, so be it. If we can't deal with it before we put it in the packet, then we'll have to figure out a way to deal with it. Where we have this problem is only in one real big area, which is we're doing a lot of legislating, a lot more than the city is used to, and that is a very cumbersome process. And as I tell people, we have about a 40-car freight train of code amendments just on zoning code. So there's just a lot of legislating that's going to come to you. As the city attorney, I'm going to work with your manager and with the mayor and with the staff in every way I can to try to make the mechanics of this as easy as possible. But I will tell you, you're going to be asked to do more legislating than you've probably done at any time in the recent past.
Well, and all of that will come in a study session first.
Yes.
Just show up and surprise us at a meeting. We get a packet for the study session. Staff has, tonight may be a slight exception, but staff has been very good about filling up the study session packet. If there's going to be a presentation, we have the presentation, and that's a new process that we've been working on, and so it will be the same with this. So we will have that to study and be ready. We will have the study session to chat and work things out, and then it will be incumbent upon us to be very clear what we want, what we want staff to do, and then what comes back is what, and so that keeping that clean and keeping that process good will, at the end, give us the best result, and we will avoid these last-minute pulls. It will happen, we know it will happen, but minimized.
And staff has been really good if there has been a change to actually vocalize a change. There's been a change to the presentation or this paragraph. So again, it sounds like it's becoming hopefully more of an exception basis. And staff has been good about acknowledging or making it known.
And realizing that you still have one more item on your agenda, so I want to keep going.
Page 2 of 9.
Move to recess here.
I have a question here. So we have about halfway down, move to close public hearing after public comment and before applicant response.
That's a typo.
That's a typo.
Yeah.
What is
It should say public comments, then the next one is close the public hearing.
Yes. The applicant.
Have you guys seen that commercial, or it's on Facebook, where somebody says, they take it literally, like, I want the cake to say May, and the cake comes back and it says, I want the cake to say May. So I asked Becky, please move to close public hearing after the public comment and before the applicant response. That's what she typed.
She's listening to me.
I was working very, very hard on that one. That was my bad. We missed it. This should be ahead of the applicant response. It's my bad. The public hearing is closed. The applicant gets the final, in a judicial setting, we call it a rebuttal, but that's the fancy lawyer term for response.
Well, that's part of, you can move them wherever you want. My issue, I think, still exists. If the public hearing is closed and the applicant then gets to respond to stuff, the applicant may be saying stuff that the public has no chance to respond to.
And the council members of the council, in a quasi-judicial setting, because the public is functioning as a witness and the applicant is functioning as a party, it's just like in a court setting. In a court setting, the witnesses don't get to testify twice. They give their testimony, but the parties get to do a closing argument. They get to do a final response. Because some of our public hearings are quasi-judicial, the applicant gets that because you're functioning just like judges.
But if they introduce new stuff during that,
They can.
so who's gonna call them on it?
You do as council
Yeah.
members.
So we say to the applicant, you can't say that?
Yeah.
What will happen is,
Most of them won't do that. Most of them come down to address what
The comment.
questions that came from the public.
if the applicant attempts to introduce new testimony, either I'm going to raise with the mayor, I'm going to say, Mayor, this is now new testimony, it was never part of the record, and as the city, I'm going to object to it and ask that you as the chair disallow it. Now,
Can you, I like that, why can't we say that? The applicant, at the appropriate place, that the
Council member?
Because that's, yes, no.
In your
That's what we will do.
rules of quasi-judicial procedure that we just discussed at the last study session, it does say that.
Yeah, but it doesn't there, so.
Well, that's just because it's not part of your legislative rules, it's part of the rules of quasi-judicial procedure.
Just write it up there on the screen.
And it says in the, so, this is a hard group to, I'm afraid my reviews after tonight are not. Okay, let's just finish up here.
Sworn in.
Yeah.
On public hearings, not only do you have them in a quasi-judicial standpoint, you also have them in a legislative standpoint on ordinances. Now, with ordinances, the staff is basically essentially going to it's the only party. You really don't have parties like you do with quasi-judicial where you have an applicant in the city. Essentially, it's staff asking you to legislate. So at the end of the public hearing, it's really a contract where you have, you do contracts by ordinance. There, essentially, the people that you'd be asking questions after the public hearing is closed is the staff. Now, motions and amendments, and I just heard this last night. Motions. First, let's talk about motions. One of your boards and commissions said, well, we do it this way because we've been watching the council and that's how they did it. And it's like, well, with all due respect to you, that was how you may have done things in the past. And we had to remind this board that they needed to unlearn a bad habit.
Wasn't us. It was another.
It was them.
It was them.
Now, after the public hearing is closed, and after on items called by the presiding officer, a motion should be made before the discussion starts. Now, we had one board in this city that just loved to have discussion without motions because, well, we want everyone to feel good about this. So we've chosen, no, don't do that. You need, under Robert's rules, you need to make a motion and have it seconded, and then the body just starts discussion.
Right out of the chutes.
Right out of the chute.
What the making of the motion does and the seconding of it is that it gives it to the body.
It puts it on the floor.
If it hasn't been made, then the body doesn't have it, and that is, the body can discuss it once they have it.
And the proper way of making a motion is, I move that. And occasionally, I'll have governing bodies that will say, so moved. So moved what? Please don't do that. Please say, I move that the council approve the contract between the city of Middleton and the Arapahoe County Human Services Department. I move that the council approve the contract between the city of Middleton and the Douglas County Public Works Department. Make an actual motion. The motion has to be seconded. Until the motion is seconded, it's not on the floor. I've had councils and I've had boards here. Somebody will make a motion and everyone will proceed to discuss it before there's a second. The motion has to be seconded. At that point, it belongs to the body. It's no longer the movement's motion, it's the body's motion. Now, if there's no second, the motion dies. that doesn't mean you can't make another motion. It means that motion is dead. Now,
Talk about why you would make a second. Why you would second versus why you wouldn't second it.
a good example is that a council member might make a motion, I move to award a contract, and the rest of, and everybody is, no, we don't want to award this contract. So you might just choose, nobody may choose to second it because they just want to kill the motion. The other time, sometimes people will want to second it because they want to discuss it, but they're not 100% sure how they want to vote. But they want the floor to discuss it, so they'll second it. And but understand, once you second it, you're no longer in control of that motion as the movement. It's the body's motion. So I've had council members say, well, I'm going to second it, but I'm sure the council's going to vote against it. And next thing you know, that council member's on the losing end of the motion, because once it got on the floor, the majority wanted it. So you should operate under the principle, if you second, it's going to the floor, you're no longer in control of it, and whatever happens, happens.
Well, if somebody wants it, I mean, if two somebodies want it, there will be a second.
There'll be a second. But yes, that's true. But I've had council members where they simply, somebody motions, and the rest of council just, we're not sure we even want to discuss this, so no one seconds, and it dies. Sometimes I've had two people second it in governing bodies I've represented, and all of a sudden, those two people think, oh, everybody's going to agree with us. It gets on the floor, and all of a sudden, it fails 5-2, and they're the only two voting for it.
So what if it never gets motion?
If it never gets moved,
Never happens.
it never happens. It has to be moved,
Right.
and it has to be seconded.
So does the mayor then say, if everybody's just quiet, and nobody says anything,
Died.
The mayor will ask, as the presiding officer, does any member of the body have a motion on this item?
right?
And in my experience, usually when the presiding officer asks that, it generates a motion.
Okay.
I think only once or twice in my career have I ever had this presiding officer ask and nobody does anything.
But seconding it doesn't mean you're agreeing with it.
No, second.
We're just opening up for discussion.
Seconding just puts it on the floor for
Right.
discussion. You just need to recognize that once you second it, it's no longer your motion, it's the body's motion.
Right, right.
Well, and you can second because you do support it.
Absolutely.
So one way a motion dies by no one seconding.
Yes.
Another way to kill something is a motion to deny. So instead, it doesn't always have to be a motion to approve and then vote against it. You can actually do a motion to deny.
Yes, that happens particularly sometimes in land use. You'll have a public hearing to rezone parcel X to something, and the council hears it, and a council member will make a motion to approve that the application to rezone parcel X to something be denied. There's a second. Now the motion before the body is to deny that rezoning. Now, if you're going to do that, your lawyer has a couple of requests. Because zoning is quasi-judicial, we need to tie that denial to the record. So once you start discussing it, I'm going to be saying, counsel, I need you to be specific in why you are denying this zoning. It isn't enough just to say I don't like it. I need you to be specific because zoning is quasi-judicial. Now, if it's just a contract or whatever, that's a legislative act, the same standards don't apply. But if you're going to move for denial of something that's quasi-judicial, we've got to lay the facts out why you're doing it.
Well, so does that mean if you're going to vote against it, you need to state your reasons for voting against it?
Yes, both for and against it, because what we're doing is we're basically acting as a judicial body and we're denying a request. And we have to have a record for that.
So each of us would have to say something. So I could say, I support Jerry's reasons for opposing this.
You can say that, that's part of the record, but I'm going to be asking you to lay a record because you're acting in this quasi-judicial capacity. The same doesn't apply when it's a contract. It's only when we're dealing with zonings that you're going to see this, or some other area where you're acting in this quasi-judicial capacity. Now, one thing that can also happen on motions is sometimes governing bodies debate and debate and debate and debate and debate. And it seems to go around in circles. Any member can move to end debate. Now, a motion to end debate is what we call a precedential motion. So if you have a motion on the floor and council's just going around in circles, a council member can move to end debate. If there's a second, you have to immediately stop discussing the substantive item. You discuss only the motion to end debate. You vote on that. If it passes, then you're going right to voting on the substantive item. If it fails, you keep on debating.
And move to end debate, we've referred to that as call a question.
Right.
Call the question. Previous question.
In the past, we've referred to it as call the question. Yeah. And we have not voted on a call the question, and we should. But in the past, we haven't.
We've called it, but I don't recall, did we vote?
No, one person calls a question and it's over.
Now, you can only call
talk about too much power.
You can only call the question once everybody's had the opportunity to speak once.
You can call it anytime.
You can't just call the question before any discussion.
Yeah, you can.
You can.
In theory, yes, you can.
In theory, you can.
You can move to end debate.
And you can vote no.
I would tell you what generally is going to happen is everybody's going to vote no.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can, in essence, have several motions to end debate. I've seen this at state legislative hearings, where there'll be 2 or 3 different times they'll move to end debate or to call the question.
Well, it goes back to why the motion belongs to the board. Motion. So one board member can't kill the motion. The board has to decide to kill.
Yes.
And also, I forgot to mention this to Stephen, we talked about it, but the mayor does not make motions or seconds. That's why I'm always asking you guys for it. So the mayor does not. I have seen council meetings, not here, but in other cities where the mayor has made a motion, and it's awkward, and it's just, I don't know that it's really a Robert's rules, but it's just kind of standard.
But they can.
It's a Robert's
You
rule.
can,
Absolutely,
but
they
I
can.
don't think you should.
Unless the rules of the body specifically authorize it, the presiding officer doesn't make a motion. Now, I've had presiding officers want to make a motion. And the proper procedure for that would be the presiding officer announces, I do want to make a motion on this item, so I'm going to relinquish the chairing of the meeting to the mayor pro tem so I may make a motion.
I think
I'll never make a motion.
Chaos.
You would make a motion to amend, potentially.
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely approved.
Maybe not the motion to
Appropriate.
approve like the standard one, but if you have an amendment, you should be able, I mean, at that point.
Under Robert's rules, the mayor would still need to relinquish the chairing of the meeting. The idea is that the presiding officer doesn't make a motion.
Well, what I would do is, if I wanted to amend, I would probably say, I would make a comment would someone entertain a motion to amend to say blank, and then if one of you wanted to do that, then go to second.
That's how chairs usually do it. I would entertain a motion to this and say what you want to, and then someone else would do it.
We can also make it Robert Rules is our guideline. It isn't our Bible that says we have to do it this way. We can still say, yes, our chair can make motions, our chair can make...
Absolutely.
We can do that. Robert Rules is not what we have to do.
Yeah, because
Okay with Councilor.
Is that what?
I'm okay with what you were saying as a recommendation that the chair can make would anyone entertain a motion to amend, and then you read it, and then another council member could say, so moved, which is the first motion, but then you still need a second.
Yeah.
But if
The other council member would repeat verbatim what the.
Councilmember Fay.
I just heard Jerry say, if we don't want to follow Robert's rules, then we don't. How do we decide that we are not following Robert's rules?
Your name needs to be Robert, first and foremost.
Who gets to decide that we're not following the rules anymore?
There's a motion to that.
If you want to change your
I'm serious.
legislative rules, you can change your legislative rules to grant the mayor the right to make motions in seconds. And if the council wants to do that, we can certainly bring back your legislative rules for discussion.
Well, and remember, we call them Bob's rules, because they are kind of the backbone of Roberts, but then
Yes.
we have added our own things here and there where.
Wait a minute.
Which is
That troubles me. We have added our own things here and there. And if, like the other night, I don't know what the change is, then I look ridiculous, because I don't know what the rules are.
Basically, your rules are the council's legislative rules. And if the council's legislative rules don't address it, they provide for you to refer to Robert's rules. So, but you can expand those legislative rules and add additional things to them if you so choose.
just as allowing the chair to make motions, seconds, and amendments.
But to do that, don't we have to all agree?
You would have.
It can't be one person decides we're doing the
We
rules.
bring it to you as an action item.
Right. And just to clear up, so the rules are really more the substantive. I mean, the ones that are core, we do. One of them that we don't is to vote on an adjournment. So the mayor just adjourns and the meeting's over. But Roberts would have you voting for an adjournment. So some of them are cumbersome. Some of them are more applicable to a different kind of board meeting than ours. So it's not that we don't follow them. We picked the ones that I think are the most applicable to the work that we do. And it's been a history of that. But yeah, our legislative, we can change those anytime we want to.
But wait a minute. Anytime we want to means that we, as a group at that moment, change them. It's not that one person says, I'm changing the rules.
They're ours.
That goes back to the beginning of our conversation. It has to take a majority of us.
They're the rules of the body.
Chair is trying to keep the meeting moving.
Right now?
But right now would be great. But any four people can make that decision.
It would be, 2 points to your point, it would be a move to suspend rules, it requires a second, and there's debate about doing that, so that's the body doing that. Going back to calling the question, previous question, it requires a second to do, if you're having a debate and someone wants to end it, it requires a second to do that. And I believe it's not a debatable motion, you just vote on ending debate and then.
Right then and there. It's
Right,
not
so you don't debate on ending debate.
Correct.
Because that defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Now, this does happen with your boards. And a number of these have said to me over the last year, well, the council does this. And it's like, no.
We do not do this anymore.
When you only have one motion at a time. You can't have multiple motions on the floor. You have a single motion, and that motion has to be resolved. I was actually at one of our boards, and we had 3 motions on the floor at the same time. It's like, no, you cannot do that. One motion at a time. Now, that motion can be amended, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But it's only one at a time.
Then back to,
Yes.
I know we can't do motions in here, but can we move to recess?
We're gonna get to how to postpone in just a second.
Recess.
I guess we're taking a break.
Take it a break.
Save that thought.
Sorry, Peggy.
relates to that second one. That needs to be said.
I want to check.
I'm gonna get to how to postpone because that motion is what we call.
For them to say, oh, well, somebody's.
So I wanna talk about that in the next slide.
Add this to it. That's.
seconded, or it can be amended. And we're going to talk about amendments in the next slide. And you might wonder, why isn't it here? Because amendments have some special little rules that fit in with the next slide. So let's talk about amendments. This actually happened with one of your bodies last night. We get the motion on the floor, and we get an amendment made by a member, and it was seconded, and this body wanted to go back and discuss the original motion. No, you don't get to do that. Once you make an amendment is regarded as precedential. You must resolve the amendment first. And as you recall on the fire, I know it seemed a bit cumbersome, but we had amendment number 1, you discussed it, you resolved it, you had amendment number 2, you discussed it and resolved it, you have amendment number 3. That's the proper process. One amendment on the floor, it's seconded, it's discussed, it's voted on. One of your boards also like to do multiple amendments at the same time. No, you do one amendment, you resolve one amendment. And
so question, you might ask a question for clarification about how the amendment differs from the main
Perfectly fine, because you're discussing the amendment. How does this deal from the language of the main motion, or how does it change the main motion? That's fine, because it relates to the amendment. Now, but you deal with just one amendment. Now, once the amendment is voted on, then you vote on the substantive item. Now, I want to point bullet number 4. This doesn't happen very often with city councils, but every so often it does. There'll be an amendment that has nothing to do with the motion at all. And let's not make a habit of this, because normally at that point the chair has the right to rule that the amendment, the fancy legal term is germane, but the chair has the right to rule that the amendment is not germane and will not be considered. So unless the body overrules. Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
So if the amendment does not relate to the motion at all, you are at risk of having the chair rule that the amendment is not germane.
And that's their job.
And that's their job. So now we're going to get to presidential motions.
A quick question before you move off of that. We have had the occasion where someone's made an amendment, and as they're kind of explaining what that amendment is, someone else gets an idea and wants to amend their amendment.
Yeah.
What has to happen is, and this gets a bit convoluted, because the amendment is on the floor, it has to be resolved first. If the amendment is not approved by the body, it doesn't exist, and it's the amendment on the floor. So the proper process there is the amendment is approved. Then a person makes an motion to amend the amendment that council has approved, and then that amendment to the amendment is considered.
Or you could vote down the amendment and then restate it.
Yes,
Which is a lot cleaner.
Yes, which is much cleaner.
Right, because what we've done in the past, we've had, if the second agrees, you can withdraw. Yeah, right.
And that, Peggy did that one a few meetings ago, and
On the wildlife one.
Yeah, which she wanted to make a friendly amendment, so she maybe made the amendment, or she made the motion, and someone who seconded it, or it was an amendment, and we used to do this.
Right.
You would go back to the person who made the motion, would go to the person who made the second and say,
you agree?
Friendly, I want to change it. Are you okay with me changing it? And that's totally, because you don't own that. The body owns it.
That's right.
So you can't make a deal with the person who seconded it. You have to say to the body. So the body has the motion at the time. It's not your friend.
Just say, I'd like to change it, I'm going to vote it down and reapply. You state your reasons, I'm going to re-amend it.
If the majority passes it, then how do you amend it? Because you've taken care of that issue.
New amendment, always re-amend it.
Amend the amendment.
You can amend the amendment.
No, you amend the motion as amended.
Yes. So now we're getting to the end.
Don't do that, you guys.
We're going to talk about presidential motions. Now these motions are special because they have to be resolved right after they're made. We've already talked about the motion to terminate debate. That's a presidential motion. We're now amending the motion as a presidential motion. You have to resolve it before you can discuss the substantive item. Also, postponing to a date certain. Some jurisdictions call it a motion to continue, others call Robert's Rules uses the nomenclature postponed to a date certain. That again is a presidential motion. It has to be resolved. Now, again, there gets to be a lot of confusion about the next two. Postpone indefinitely. Some jurisdictions will use a motion to table as a means to postpone indefinitely. In this city, postpone indefinitely means you're killing it. When you approve a motion to postpone indefinitely, it's dead because there's no means to bring it back. It's done. A motion to table to a date certain means it's not going to come back until that day. Now, the last one is a point of order. A point of order is how you appeal the ruling of the chair. And the way that this is properly done is the chair makes a ruling. And you then would say, Madam Chair, point of order. I disagree with this ruling for this reason. If there's a second to the point of order, it then is voted on by the body.
Point of order is,
Before it's voted on.
point of order is not seconded. It's not secondable.
What?
Isn't point of order? I thought point of order is, doesn't require a second.
Yeah, that's like rules or something.
Yeah, point of order is a rule. It doesn't require that.
It's different. Okay, let's divide that.
Point of order, please.
Because point of order is, and actually, most often it's the chair that may ask for point of order because something just went wacko. And I look down at the city attorney and ask for a point of order. And that's just basically saying help. But the other one, I think, Steve, that we might be mixing with this is where the chair makes a decision, and I can't remember what it's called, but if someone on the body doesn't like the decision, then they can say, I object to that, and I don't know how I verb.
Does the board agree with the decision?
And then they do get the second.
Right.
And then the chair has an opportunity to explain why they did what they did, and then that's all the explanation. There's no more discussion, and then there's a vote. If the body overturns the chair's decision, then the chair's decision doesn't stand. If you don't, then it stands.
That is called an appeal. Point of order is where a member disagrees with a ruling by the chair. And I did check, and Councilman Schnack is correct, it doesn't require a second.
It does or does not?
It does not.
It's a clarification almost.
Is where it does require a second, and that is a motion where members appealing the ruling of the chair, and that does require a second. Now, what normally will happen with a point of order is the chair has a point of order is made, the chair responds to the point of order. Now, if the member is unhappy with the chair's response, then what the member would do is make a motion to appeal the ruling of the chair, and then there'd have to be a second. That's a precedential motion, and the body would vote on it. And it would either uphold the chair, or it would overturn the chair's ruling.
And move on one way or another.
Move on one way or another.
So the difference, the point of order is between one council member and the chair. The appeal is the body.
It's the body. The idea of a point of order is that a member can make that point, and the chair then may say, well, yeah, I agree with you. Or the chair may say, no, this is my position. And then it would be up to the member to decide whether
they're okay with it or they feel it with the body.
The point of order is more for procedures. Say, oh, point of order, there wasn't a second, or we're off topic, or it's all about procedure, basically.
Yeah, the point of order.
It's of the order.
Yeah, you're right. You could be saying something, and I could go, wait, no, a point of order, and that's when you have to interject.
Right. And she would ask you to explain.
The chair rules on the point of order.
Yes, the chair rules, and that's it.
Right.
There's no vote. The vote comes if you appeal the ruling of the chair.
Right.
And the proper nomenclature is, I move to appeal the ruling of the chair, and then the chair would see if there's a second, then you immediately proceed to a vote on the appeal of the ruling of the chair.
Is there discussion during that?
No, it's a basically...
You just move right into the vote.
The chair gets an opportunity to explain if there's a question about why the chair ruled or whatever, but the discussion is very limited. It's much like, again, when, in theory, if you read Robert's rules, a motion to postpone indefinitely doesn't really have discussion, but everybody I've ever represented, there's at least some cursory discussion about, here's why we want to kill this. But basically, the idea of the motion on appeal is you're appealing the ruling of the chair, and the council gets to a vote, and either the chair's ruling is upheld or the chair's ruling is overturned.
But an appeal is a debatable.
And it's a debatable, but basically,
there is discussion.
Now, what I would tell you is, all the years I've only had one chair's ruling overturned on appeal. I did have a mayor in another city make a ruling and on a point of order, and there was a motion to appeal, and it it was actually overturned. But it's a very rare thing at a city council level. You might see it more in a legislative body like a state legislature. It really doesn't happen.
Well, and that actually, whether it's debatable or not, varies between the versions of Robert's rules.
Yes.
He goes in and out of whether that, so it's inconsistent. It's really, the board would need to decide.
It's our legislative rule then.
Yeah.
So, the last one is a motion to reconsider. Now, it can only be taken after there's been a vote on a motion or an agenda item. The matter's been concluded, and it cannot be revisited except under a motion to reconsider. Now, motions to reconsider have some very unique rules. The movement on a motion to reconsider can only be a member of the majority. So say we have a 4-3 vote, and one of the fourth goes, oops, I really don't think I did the right thing here. They can move to reconsider. Anyone can second, but it has to be a member of the majority. A member of the minority cannot move to reconsider. It can be made during the same meeting before the adjournment, but it must be addressed no later than the next scheduled meeting. You can't say, 6 months from now, oops, I made a mistake on this, I want to reconsider. No.
So if we are printing this up for guidelines,
Yes.
then I think the next scheduled meeting needs to be clarified. It would have to be a regular or special meeting. It can't be in a study session.
It can't be at a study session. It would have to be at a properly agenda-sized meeting. So if you had a special meeting before your next regular scheduled meeting, that would be the next meeting. If you say, for example, you had the meeting on the 17th, and you had a special meeting on the 24th, you couldn't say, I'm going to wait until the first meeting in May to do the motion to reconsider.
Yeah.
The idea is it's the next meeting, regular, special, it's the next meeting.
Yes, but are we going to share this with the boards and commissions?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. I think that needs to be added to that
Yeah.
bullet.
Okay. And because we are going to be sharing this with our boards and commissions as well. And how does that done? Normally, the way that this is done is that if a council member who's in the majority wishes to reconsider, they would notify the mayor, manager, I would like to reconsider this item. And on the agenda, you will actually have a two-part item. You have part A, which is a action on a motion to reconsider the council action of blank on blank. If that motion fails, you never go any further, you're done. If that motion passes, it's as if the prior action didn't occur and we're back to the prior action. So whenever you see a motion to reconsider, you see it always in two parts. The first piece, reconsider, second piece, the action. But you never get to the second piece if the first piece doesn't pass.
Does that have to be, to prepare for that, does it have to be put on the agenda?
It has to be on the agenda as an agenda item, but it's a little bit weird because you'll see it as an A and a B item. And you also have the presiding officer mention, if A doesn't pass, we don't go to B. Yes.
So if it has to be on the Thursday before the next schedule, so the scheduled meeting has to be a public...
24 hours.
Yes, it has to be an open public meeting.
Regular
It's an official action. A reconsideration is an official action, just like any other action you take.
And does that mean that then the motion to reconsider needs to happen before that Thursday the packet goes out, or it has to happen 24 hours before the public meeting?
Normally what would happen is we generate an agenda item. So if we don't know, then you're going to have to be going to the mayor and asking for a special dispensation to add an agenda item. I would just tell you that creates huge, and again, I'll let Mark talk about this, but it does create big problems when we have to add special items.
It can happen.
It can happen.
I don't want it to happen.
You were asking about the motion. The motion acts at the meeting. There's just an agenda item to act on that motion.
Say that again?
You were asking when the motion to?
So we have an option to do a motion to reconsider. That motion to reconsider needs to be made, I'm asking, does it need to be made before Thursday so it can be on the packet, or can it be made up to 24 hours before the public?
The request should be made before Thursday, because if you don't make the request before Thursday, the staff has no way to know to put it on the agenda.
You requested an agenda item to make a
Requested
motion.
agenda item for the motion should be made like any other.
Should be, but it can be 24 hours.
In essence, you can make any item late. The presiding officer who agrees that you can put an item on the agenda with up to 24 hours notice, you can do that. I'm just saying the practice here in the city, like most cities is, you should try to have your agenda item submitted through the mayor and manager to the clerk by the Thursday before the meeting.
But to answer her question, if you have 4 council members who all won the majority of that vote, they can all say on 25 hours before, we're adding that to the
Absolutely, they can do that.
Like it or not, Mark. and he would not be happy.
Absolutely.
But yes.
How do we deal with getting information? So for the person that's not making a motion to reconsider, I might be out talking to a number of people about the vote we just passed. I get more information, I get more feedback, but that I didn't share any of that with anyone. So how do you manage that?
That's a very fascinating
That's a tough one, yeah.
Because of the way that Colorado, and virtually this is true in every state, the open meetings law works, which you can't have serial meetings between yourselves. What normally happens with that is a council member would approach the manager, mayor, or myself and say, I am thinking, I'm a member of the prevailing side, I am thinking about a motion to reconsider. Normally, what my practice has always been when I get that approach is I'm going to notify all of you that I have been approached by council member so-and-so regarding a motion to reconsider. I will be asking the mayor and manager to put that on the agenda. Please don't discuss it among yourselves, but I just want you to know I've been approached with that item.
The practical answer to that is that if a council member really is wanting to request a motion to reconsider, and you've had new information, you really do need to talk to myself or the mayor here way before Thursday in order for us to communicate through a staff communication, what is that additional information? Why is it perhaps the council members wanting that to be reconsidered? Otherwise, if you wait 24 hours in advance, there's little likelihood that staff's going to be able to communicate anything.
Well, I feel like there's so much risk to this. That's hard to manage. Why is it even out there as an option? For what? I mean, I'm trying to say, what's the value of this? Because it just seems to actually expose more risks.
I think it's one of the scariest things that a council could do, and I think the reason most of the time something like this would happen is that there was not proper prep work done. So council was making a decision without all the information that they needed, or that there was a push, or that there was some sort of pressure or something like that. So that there was not the opportunity for us to have a fair and large scale gathering of information and time to take care of that, time to do the debate. We had this one time, and I can't remember what it was. I don't know where you and Peggy, of course, was on with me. We had it one time. It was, I can't remember what the issue was, but it is messy. Messy. And it is rare because most of the time meetings are well prepped, and we're well prepped, and so we can we make decisions that we can stand by and not doubt. But it's
And that's-
messy, Karina, sorry, we can't make it any neater.
But the other part of her question, though, she has new information. She has to share it.
Then she needs to share with the mayor and the manager, and then we will work through the mechanics. A good example where this came up in the prior city I was in, the council had a motion before it to abandon an easement. And the council acted to abandon the easement. After everything was done, a day later, one of the utilities who had been notified, who had never responded, suddenly popped up and said, "Oh my goodness, we have to have this easement. It's just going to be the end of the world if we don't have it." And so then, of course, the council member representing that district said, "Oh, we need to move to reconsider this," and they wanted the prevailing side. And so that's the kind of thing. It's a very rare motion, but
Got to be available.
it does pop up once in a great while.
Let's put it away, it's a hard bar to get to, because it has, you have to get someone else to support it too. And you have to change your mind. So there has, it's
So
a
is
high
the
bar.
second one to support it, does that happen before it gets to the agenda or once it gets to the agenda?
No, you need a second to get it to the agenda.
To get it to the
In
agenda?
essence, if you make a motion to reconsider you're on the prevailing side and no one seconds, it dies. You have to have a second. And then the debate initially is only on the reconsideration of the item. You don't get into the substantive debate unless council moves and approves the motion to reconsider the item. If the council rejects the reconsideration, you don't discuss the substantive item. And the good news is hopefully we won't see the but it's just that it's a unit of the rules, which is why it's here. With that, I've covered everything I have to present. So now everyone has the floor. Through the mayor has the floor.
So I could envision, instead of doing this, having an entirely new motion that not undoes, but essentially contradicts and does something.
Basically bringing forth a new item that effectively
Achieves the same purpose.
can undo it. Councils do that sometimes. They, in essence, as I tell governing bodies, when you legislate, you are always entitled to change your mind. Now, as your lawyer, now I'm going to talk to you as your lawyer for a second, if you change your mind all the time, it makes it really difficult for your lawyer to negotiate, because it's kind of hard to then know exactly what my instructions are. But yes, can you change your mind every 2 weeks? Yes, you can. I would hope that you don't, because you're going to drive your lawyer nuts, but yes, you can.
Okay.
So we had two legislative rules that we discussed that I think needed to be added then. One is that the chair can make motions, seconds, and amendments, as well as the other one was on the case of the appeals with discussion. So that's something we need to add into our rules.
Yes, my suggestion, if the chair is in agreement, would be why don't we put the legislative rules, just the legislative rules, not your protocols, on a study session, and I'll provide the copies to all of you, hard copies, and then the council can discuss any changes you want to make to the legislative rules.
Do that.
Yeah, that's good. We'll do that.
So this presentation, there were some changes that we discussed tonight as far as orders and things like that. So will you be updating this presentation with some of the
I will update this presentation because this is part of the training we do for boards and commissions. We're really trying to get all of our boards and
that'd be
commissions
great. So we can
much more structured.
Perfect. That's great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good conversation. So our next one is equally as much fun.
Oh, boy.
Protocols and standards of conduct. Everybody got a copy with edits. I think are there any questions about those? I think
let's do this. Let's go around each one at a time.
One document first, or?
Yeah, let's do protocols and standards first. And we'll start with Kyle. Kyle, any additional issues, concerns?
The only issue I have is with making public statements. With item B, one, I see item B and item C somewhat contradictory. But B says council, board or commission members should refrain from making or posting statements in public or social media identifying as council, board, or commission member of the city. I mean, when I read that, it says, if David Gilbert calls you up and asks you something, you're saying, I'm not a council member. Or if you're on Facebook or Twitter, you can't identify yourself as a council member. I think I know I do, and I think a few other council members have Facebook pages that say, first name, last name, council member. I would not agree that we can't do that. I think that's very important.
Which item are you on again, Colin?
4, making public statements.
Page 4.
And if I may, I sent out an email here early this afternoon with a few changes to all 3 documents. So I gave you a hard copy that's sitting in front of you here that has some of those issues. In fact, one of the issues that Kyle raised about social media, we actually have under section 4C is kind of a new piece that we'll talk about.
That's you have C there, but B right before it kind of contradicts it.
I understand that. That's your point.
I think the reason for B is, I can tell you, we've had a couple of blogs. In fact, we had a board and commission member who basically posted on a blog and identified themselves as a board and commission member, a long criticism of various city practices, staff, and it was essentially a posting that which the person had an absolute First Amendment right to do as an individual. But reading the posting, you would have concluded that this was somehow a statement of the city. And what this provision was trying to get at, and certainly I'm happy to work with the city manager on rewording it, was if you are a council member and you want to post on social media, that's perfectly fine, perfectly appropriate. But if you're going to do that in your official capacity, that's perfectly fine, but what it was trying to get at was this whole question and individuals posting on social media and then basically indicating they're a city official, but then proceeding to perhaps say things either undercut the city or undercut the body, and I'm happy to work with the city manager and council on rewording that.
I'm perfectly happy with C. I think C is great. Just if you read B by itself, it kind of is saying, well, you can't do C.
Yeah. And B was the addition that we made here a few weeks ago when we sat down with Kathy Novak. That was at the same meeting.
I wonder if we could just remove B and C would cover the needs, Steve?
Certainly, if council wants to remove, I think C and D cover that if council wishes to remove B.
Okay, so let's remove B. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
With D, do we want to make it where it's criticism is
Page
done
4, Peggy.
some way criticism done as a representing yourself as part of the city. To say, hey, I'm on this board and staff doesn't know what they're doing. That would not be.
What do you?
So see where it says criticism of staff should be done through city manager. If there was some way, I don't know if it's in A to say.
Talk about D.
Yeah, I'm talking about D. Criticism as representing yourself as a member of the city should be done through.
Well, and I think keep in mind, these are only your standards and protocols as council
I guess that,
member.
that's
So
fair
this
point.
is only applying to you in your position as council member.
Right.
The idea here again is if you have, under the charter, if you have a problem with staff, you are to take it to the city manager. It is not appropriate for you to then go into social media and say, oh, the staff is terrible, da-da-da-da-da. No, that actually, I would tell you that I think that violates the charter. What you should be doing is, you should be going to the city manager and saying, I'm not very unhappy with your staff, here's why. City manager, the staff works for you, I'd like you to take care of it.
Yeah, fair point, that's that.
Okay, so we're good there. And by the way, all of these are numbered 4, so they're all. So if you're looking for page 4, you will find it.
I was saying section 4.
Now let me refer to the Roman numerals.
All right.
So we eliminated
For page 2
strikes.
here, not
That's 2
I know.
strikes.
We're keeping score.
Microsoft strikes again.
So we do, how does that happen?
I think that's what we said.
Karina?
So we're
On C in the same section, we say it is recognized that social media is a communication tool. So I think what's important here is there are a number of ways that a council can communicate. It's social media, it's email, it's an op-ed in the newspaper. So I just want to make sure this isn't too restrictive to social media, and that isn't, and you kind of do that in the second sentence, the same manner that any other form of media. So maybe just look at the wording, make sure this is not just boxing us in and, next year there's going to be another platform or something else, right? So I just want to make sure.
Letter A kind of covers
Yeah.
that other that you're talking about too. I think that unfortunately, it's kind of, and a lot of this is events, and I know the city attorney has seen the legal issues that have popped up in other communities because of social media and things council and electeds have done. And so it's actually, social media has kind of just elevated itself to this special little place that we have to kind of watch closely. So,
And
because of the viral nature.
I don't know that we have to decide this now, and maybe it exists and I just don't know. So companies adopt a social media policy. I don't know if one exists for the city, and perhaps we need to be aware of it and train on it, or et cetera. So
The city has a general policy, but I would be recommending to you again that at some point we have a study session on sort of a social media policy for council members, because
and board members.
board members.
Well, and what about for staff too?
Right.
Well, in fact, Steve and I talked about that this afternoon, so I agree. I think it's time for us to bring that.
So I think this covers us for now, but I do think we have to formulate some sort of
Sure,
policy.
you all will be having Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook accounts, and
Okay, Kyle, are those your only
Absolutely.
On
protocols?
I have a larger question I sent to Mark. Is there, I don't want to say a consequence, but what is if there's any teeth there, what is, if someone says, okay, they're there, I don't care, I'm not going to follow them, what happens?
That is.
Not that it's going to happen, but.
That's
It happens all the time.
I know, $50
Yeah.
million question. We don't have in some ways, it's like an ethics for council, and then there's a consequence from that. We took a stab at it at one point, and it is one of the most hairy dogs and sticky issues. A number of communities do have some. Boulder, I think theirs is something like 35 pages long. It's ridiculous. So I think we've all have this angst about what's the consequence, and really council manages council. And outside of that, if someone on council is behaving badly, then the community can manage that. There's ways that the community can affect things. But in terms of that, I think it really is about, there's some options. Can be a private conversation from the mayor to that person with a warning, and a second time there could be a public comment about it. There could be public lynching.
That escalated quickly.
Removing them from some of their duties as liaisons to certain groups. But beyond that, there really isn't. And it's really up to council if they want to implement those and under what protocol they want to changed. So,
Would that be something that is allowed in an executive session?
Not under our charter as it's written. Under Colorado law, yes, but not under the charter as it's written. Now, what my suggestion would be if council wants to discuss that item, and again, this is, I leave to the presiding officer, that we again schedule a separate study session to discuss that, because that becomes a pretty long, lengthy discussion in itself, how to address violations. I've been have processes for that, but that's something I think you probably want to just address as a single item.
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned. I'm just, in case Pat's like, whatever, I'm not going to follow this whole section. I mean,
yeah.
are we
Well,
just
and
gonna
I
deal
think
with
that without an official protocol, I think that there is a way that just, as a group that works together, if we see someone going off the edge, I think that it is, in some ways, it's our responsibility to help prevent that from happening or help, let that person know. And if things just elevate into a different level, we have ways that we can work with that too. But having, and it's really just a matter of respect for each other and see something like that. Because I don't believe that any of us are going to do anything intentional to sometimes you just forget it's a protocol, and so you do anything like a little. So I think we can manage ourselves just without it.
And it has happened major, and nobody won.
Right.
There's been some major violations, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
And nobody wins on those things.
No. Pat?
I'm good.
Peggy? Karina?
Hold on, let me see. Can you go to somebody else and I can find my questions? Carol, thank you.
Fine.
I just one that I ran by Steve earlier. It was on page 2, which is actually
Page 4.
page 4 in your copy. Well, I have the unredlined copy. No, but it would be Roman numeral 2. When you get down to the I and J's and stuff like that. But it's kind of throughout the document. And I asked Steve the difference between a should and a must and a shall. Some places we say should, some places we say shall.
Shall is mandatory. Shall means you must. You have to do it. It's mandatory. Should, generally, courts look at should as being not quite as mandatory as shall. It's more aspirational. That doesn't mean that you get a pass on it. It's just shall is considered in the law a mandate. You have to do it. Should doesn't quite have that status. And I recognize for those folks who taught English, I'm drawing some straws here, but that's a legal straw that the courts draw. So
Legalese is not English.
And the particular one I was looking at was an I and J, where it says council boards should consider the best interest of the city.
Yeah.
And the other one was should refrain from undermining the council. So that's where should, I think, as you just defined it, is appropriate versus must or shall.
And this, I would just say also is a little bit tricky because even as an elected official, you don't give up your First Amendment rights. So you all retain those, and sometimes individuals are going to have a little bit different view of what is appropriate and what isn't. And so this, I think, these protocols, I think, do recognize that all of you continue to have your First Amendment rights as elected officials, and sometimes you're going to say things that I might think undermine a council, but you don't, or undermine you don't, and that's perfectly appropriate.
Karina?
Okay, I find one. Under meeting protocols, item number 2A. Okay, so bear with me, because I've had to read this a couple of times.
You're talking on the first page then?
Yeah, meeting protocols right here, this section.
The first 4.
Yes, the first 4. Comments to be included in city council's packets, it's in the middle of the paragraph, will be sent to the city clerk no later than 4 p.m. on the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. Clear? Okay.
So no later than 2.
No later than 4. on Thursday?
It's just 1400 PM.
One is crossed out.
It's
One
right,
guy. Xed out, struck out.
Okay.
If there are issues that need to be addressed after packets are distributed, the correspondence received by the city clerk by noon on the Monday before the public hearing will be disseminated to city council via email. Clear and collated. Any documents received after noon on the day of a council meeting will be disseminated to the night of the city meeting. Clear. But what happens with the information between noon on Monday and noon on Tuesday?
It's gone. It doesn't exist.
Right?
Yeah, you're right.
You didn't catch that one? What's coming on you? All right, so we're missing 24 hours there, or 12 hours, whatever it is.
I don't have a good answer for that. This is the old language. I didn't catch that before. So this has been in place, I think, for the last few years, but didn't catch that language.
I would tell you the practice that the city clerk has had has been that items that are received up to 5 p.m. of your meeting day are provided to you either by email or in physical hard copy at the meeting. Now, items after the close of business on your meeting day are not provided to you because we have no way of getting those. But the practice of the clerk has been that up until 5 p.m. of that Tuesday, if we receive an email or if we receive a hard copy comment, those will be provided to you generally in physical form or in electronic form.
So can we change this language to the practice that we are employing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I guess that was my suggestion. Let me sit down with the clerk here. We'll walk through that. And again, this would come before you as an action item, and then we can delineate in the staff communication what that practice and the change is.
Will this come on consent?
We can, if that's your preference.
Don't yank it, whatever you do, people.
I think just changing the word Monday to Tuesday would
Could be.
Well,
And the 5 o'clock. I just want us to be consistent.
I thought the clerk said that if she received things by 4 on that Tuesday, that she could have stuff.
And that was because we discussed this.
Sure, and I think that's the answer. I need to confirm with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has something that we all discussed.
Yeah.
And you did discuss moving it from 5 to 4 on the meeting day, and
So she'd have time to,
so that she has time to get it all processed.
We have nothing better else to do but read right up. Right up till last.
You can make a motion to take time to read.
Well, I'm out in the parking lot reading my phone going, what the? Seriously.
Marina, do you have anything else? Okay, I don't have anything. So we have,
so the question too, after the packets are distributed, that's language that goes back to when we used to have packets delivered to our houses. So something other than packets distributed.
They're getting distributed by email.
They're just electronically distributed.
Electronic distribution.
No, but whatever the appropriate language, I think there's a better word that's not coming to my brain than distributed.
Perhaps provided would be a better word than distributed, because the packet is still provided to you. We're just providing it to you in an electronic form unless you request it in a physical form. So I think my recommendation would be we change the word distributed to provided.
perfect.
Probably.
Done.
Yeah.
There you go.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Good. So that, come back on consent with those changes made.
Okay.
Rules of teamwork.
May I just a
Yes,
little
you may.
explanation? So, I sent you the email a week ago here, and I took the notes from Kathy Novak, and I provided those, a copy to it, and I just took a shot at trying to somehow capture the meaning of that in a series of statements. Hers were, just obviously a little more vague. So I take no pride in authorship here. So if you wanted to change that,
I
that's
think that
fine.
was great. I actually think that was great. That helped me a lot.
Okay, well then you can congratulate Councilmember Cole, because she's the one who actually submitted these revisions all in red. By the way, I do have an accepted version of all those changes if you want to read what it looks like.
Oh, this is so easy.
Okay, yeah, here it is.
What page number is it?
Page 4.
It's 4 of 1.
I don't know how that happened. I have no idea how that works.
You could try to do that again.
No idea.
Page 4.
I may have made a couple of bloopers because I see we got mailings for all of them except 4. We need to keep an open mind, right? So we got be this and be that and do not and thing.
Yeah.
So keep an open mind. And on 2, next to the last line, we probably need actively listen to each other, period, and then a capital T, try not to monopolize.
I'm sorry. Try that again. Where are you at?
Number 2.
Oh, number 2. I'm sorry.
I would like to suggest that if Peggy wants to rewrite her rewriting, that Peggy could rewrite it without us all working on it together. Just because we have the gist of what it's about. I trust you to rewrite it.
I mean, I'm essentially just correcting grammar and punctuation.
I was going to go ahead and correct you, but I thought it wasn't my place.
I'll correct her. I'll make it my place.
I just have 2 observations.
Yes.
And it's not about nitpicking, but one, so we talk here as try. Why are we using the word try? Just don't do it. Not, it's, I don't like, the try feels like
Be open-minded.
just be open-minded. Leave personal agendas out. I mean,
Okay, now we're editing again.
no. It's, instead of saying try to leave personal agendas out, it's leave personal agendas out.
I know, but if somebody,
How about this? How about if we have everybody write their edits on a piece of paper and hand them all to Peggy, and Peggy compile them?
Okay, that was my only one, but I'm happy to.
on this one, I just disagree. People can try, but they may not succeed.
Oh,
just
geez.
like you try to bake a souffle, and it doesn't necessarily come out that way.
But this is our, so I should have started with my first comment. My first comment, so please hold that comment. My first observation was, is this rules of teamwork or is it rules of engagement? To me, it's how we're going to engage with each other. So I feel like rules of engagement is the more appropriate heading for this. Everyone okay with that?
I don't care what we call it.
Now I'll come back to
I don't care
the
another
try.
Don't either care.
So since this is a rule of engagement, we're setting an expectation. Yes, everything that we're doing here, we're going to try our best to accomplish. That's why, to me, the word try is unnecessary and almost says only if you want to. So the expectation is leave personal agendas out. The expectation is, there's another place that says try.
How about I'll try, but I don't promise?
I think we should remove the word try. Wherever try is,
Well, I would agree because I don't think it's consistent with the rest of the document, which says we will be,
Right.
not give.
Get started. Yep.
So it's not consistent with the tone, so I would support that. Support.
You taking notes on that, Peggy?
Here's my agenda. Start my change. There we go.
Good job, Kathy.
It's on page 4.
We discuss Robert's rules.
We'll talk. I think that's it.
Yay.
All right.
Nothing.
On that topic.
Yep.
And then, I don't know if, I just have one quick little thing for council. Do you have any comment?
Oh, I think just quickly, I think on the council's tentative calendar, Obviously, this is a very active document that we try to keep up to date, and I appreciate the fact that when we have a meeting that's canceled, that I probably need to do a better job of notifying you for that. And actually, we're looking at maybe a different approach to that. With some of these special meetings, breakfast meetings, we may have on a separate document, and some of these other legislative issues maybe on a different one. So between Randy and I, we're thinking of a couple of ways of doing that. But now, the other point I want to make about the council's tentative calendar is the summer is a really busy time. And we've got a couple of meetings that we've already canceled, CML, 4th of July. So if you're taking vacations, and some of you have already contacted me about that, I really appreciate the fact that you tell me. Even if the vacation changes later, the dates, that's fine. But I'm trying to line up some of these more significant issues when obviously you're all here. So letting me know would be deeply appreciated.
Are we obviously all here tonight?
Tonight is good. I'm not so sure about the months of July and August.
I was teasing whether we're present.
Yes.
Well, what we may have to do because of some of the things that are coming down the pipe, because some of it is going through planning, and as it gets through planning, it's got to hit us. So we do have some timing things. We may need to schedule special meetings if we have problems with regular meetings. So a heads up is best as early as possible.
Please.
So, can I ask, coming back to your comment about meetings that we have at breakfast and things like that, can those just be sent out as an invitation to the Google Calendars that we have? Because that's a good way to keep track of who's going to be there, not going to be there, and then if it gets canceled, and it's off your calendar.
We sure could. Yeah, we sure could.
I actually put them on there.
Yeah, breakfast meetings or...
those types of events.
Sure can.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things too is that there is a good communication with Becky as to what you prefer. Because if I don't use that Google Calendar, I use my own, so it wouldn't help me. But I also respond quickly to emails, and some other council members don't respond as quickly. So that helps keep that information flowing. So she will customize her communication method out to each of us as we need, just as long as she knows what that is.
Yep, good point.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay. Jerry and I have been working on the review process. So we have a review coming up for both our city manager and our city attorney. Mark was official as city manager in June of 2017, and we hired Steve also, I think, was it April?
I started on July 1.
July 1. So because we do not have the privilege of an exec session where we can discuss personnel issues, Jerry and I have, and this was very, very, very early on, maybe our second or third meeting when we looked at the board commission and the different liaison things. Jerry and I were under review things, so that's why we're running with this process or with this work. We are hiring have hired a facilitator. Her name is June Ramos. She has facilitated for us before, and she is doing some work in some other. She knows us well, and so that's an advantage, I think, because we're a little bit of a learning curve. And we met with her as to facilitating the gathering of information and input from council for the reviews. So what she will be doing is reaching out to you guys the first week of May, second week of May. And her first step, actually, let me back up. Her first step is to provide a, let me get the wording right. It's a performance review. Well, it's kind of a performance review of their own, evaluation of their own work to both Mike and to Steve. So they will have specific categories and then talk about where they think how they think they've done, what they could improve on, what they've done well. That will then come to us. So we will all get that information, and all of this is obviously privileged. This is personnel. Contrary to what I think some may believe, it really I don't think that this is fodder for the public. This is our direct reports. These are our employees, and it is our responsibility to do this particular piece of business. And I think that, you know, I've never had a review done in public, and had we still had exec sessions, it would not be happening either. So we will work through June on this. She will meet with you two by two, and just get your input and get your feedback. And she will have formats, and she's got some good documents and stuff like that, and we'll go through all that. And then we will also, that information then will be gathered. She'll culminate it into kind of a...
To back up, Becky's going to schedule the meetings.
Yes, Becky will be scheduling it, and we're doing 2 by 2, and I think, Peggy, you are solo. So
I'm a tough cookie, so.
I know. And actually, I can tell you, Karina and Carol, you're together. Pat and Kyle, you're together. And Peggy, you're single. And then Debbie and Jerry. So then she'll prepare a written summary, which will include comments and consensus around performance. And then that will come to Jerry and I, and then Jerry and I will arrange a meeting. And that document will go back out to all of you too. So you will have a chance to see what we end up meeting with each of our directs and going over the information in there. So it will be, and then I will say, this doesn't prohibit you from having a one-on-one conversation with them on your own too. This is their review that gets documented. This is finally, we're setting goals and expectations for both of them. They've been operating now, Mark, really for almost 2 years, 1 year as an interim and the second year as a city manager, without any goals or expectations, and same with the city attorney. And so this is going to set their goals and expectations from us, and then it will also provide them a review of where we feel they're at this point. And then certainly the next review in a year, we'll have that basis to build from. We will also at that time review their salary and prepare a bit of a kind of a range, so that you guys have at least some sort of context. And then we typically just ask council to select your percentage, and we suggest a couple of percentages if you could put it in, and then majority of that, we live in the majority rules world, we'll majority rule. And then we will bring it to a regular meeting. All the documentation that we will be working on with this will be considered work product. It is not discoverable as work product. And so we will prepare a resolution that will go to a council meeting publicly, where we will share, the intention to give them a raise or whatever the case, and then that gets voted on, and then that is the action that happens. And we're looking at doing this, having that sort of backing out from July 17th. So July 17th is as close as we could get to the June, magic June, with only one meeting in June and only one meeting in July. So...
and we were shooting for the end of June.
Yeah, but there's a meeting, so...
Right.
So Deb, what about our third direct report?
The judge, we do review the judge. We review him every 2 years, and we did him last year, so we don't have to do him this year.
Yeah.
Yes. And Peggy had brought up a 360. And in the past, we have done 360s where we have gone to the directors, to the direct reports of our appointees and have them give input. There's a variety of reasons. Some folks like it, some folks don't, some folks think it's valuable, some folks don't. I think in this particular instance, at this particular time, the fact that they don't have any goals or expectations, there's not a real baseline to go off of at this point. Also, the fact that Mark's got 3 that are fairly new. One that's brand new, Keith is fairly new, and Randy. So, and and Steve also, having been here a short period of time, and so we're recommending that we don't do the 360, that we do kind of contain it to this. And I think that once we have this under our belt and we've got the kind of a baseline for the next review, then we can determine another way. We've done a variety of different things. There's endless ways you can do it, but it's what we feel we need at the time. So any questions or comments to any of that? June will be very thorough with getting you the communication. I just ask that you guys get it back to her. We stay on schedule and keep it moving. So, good?
I think it was great.
Great. Okay. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Yeah, that was...
Thank you.